We'll open this meeting today. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good. We'll call to order. Roll call.
Supervisor Long. Here. Supervisor Flynn. Supervisor Parks. Supervisor Bennett.
Here.
And Supervisor Foy.
Here. For a moment of affirmation, we don't have anybody. We had a card on that. Since we don't have anybody speaking, we'll get rid of that. Yes. Yes, that's just let's take a moment for that, for the people who lost their lives in the collapse of that bridge. It's a tragedy. So, and I want to thank our Public Works for working with the papers to make a comment about that and assure the people of this county the different things they did there. So, thank you for that. Okay. Supervisor Long, you lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any objections? No? Okay, so done. We have agenda review.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, we have, I think here, 5 modifications. Under consent item number 11, there's a replacement for page number 2. The first 3 sentences of the first paragraph of the letter was inadvertently, electronically dropped out, and now has been brought back. Item number 46, the MOU has been posted on the website. Item number 47, the agenda title only should read, receive and approve, not read and file. The board letter is correct. Item number 59, there's a revised chart and resolution, and there's a request for item number 33 to be continued to September 11th.
Excuse me.
Item number 33.
Mr. Johnson, I requested that item 33 be continued. I understand that there might be a problem in that the report is already overdue, and there might be a penalty involved if we don't file it on time. My problem is that we have noticed some discrepancies in the figures of the report. My staff worked all of Friday and yesterday, and this morning gave me the numbers. They haven't completed the review, so my fear is stuck between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, as far as timing is concerned. I don't know if it's legal, Mr. County Counsel, to approve the report subject to correcting the figures, because the figures are part of the study.
Mr. Chairman, this is the first time I've heard of this issue, and so I'm not up to speed on the deadline, but I'm sure your board could approve the plan conditioned upon revision if any of the figures are determined to be incorrect.
Would that be okay for you?
That would be fine with me if you feel that you have enough information in the report to make the...
I mean, how incorrect are these reserved?
A lot of them are wrong.
And is there, you're saying that these haven't been corrected, you don't know the answers yet?
They are in the process of being reviewed. I got a corrected sheet for one of the tables, and it seems that everything has been moved down a line and skipped a line, and some projections have been used instead of actuals, and only the secured roll was used when it should use all the rolls.
Supervisor Long?
As this is a 10 o'clock time certain public hearing, could we just leave it as it is and at 10 o'clock discuss it and see if there can be more information acquired by then, and perhaps we can then act on it?
You think you'll have some more information?
They can work with my staff while we're here.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Marty, would you like to?
Well, I think, as I understand from talking to our staff, Christine just advised us this morning that she had this difficulty, and in talking with our staff, it very well may be that the appendix is ancillary to the overall report. So what we will do is that between now and 10 o'clock, we will talk with the auditor's staff, see where we're at, and then come back to your board with a status report and what we recommend at that point in time. I suspect that we would want you to move forward, but we will work out the issues with that, if in fact we're asking you to do that.
Is there also the ability for us to find out if there's a penalty if we don't do something during this time?
That would be Ms.
Do we know?
Robinson's.
Okay.
Can you do that?
As I understand, there is a penalty involved, but we will come back with you at 10 o'clock and talk about that.
Give us the option.
Okay.
Maybe we can do that.
Good.
Okay? Okay. That sounds fine. So then, that's it? Nothing else on this agenda review? We have a motion to accept then? So moved. Okay. So we do that. Consent items. But before we have a consent, we have a card on our consent items. Carol Dean Williams, you have something you'd like to say about one of the items? Number 8? Number 11. Number what? Number 11.
Thank you, Chairman Foy. Number 11 is about appointment of Georgiana. Oh, no, it's a block grant. I'm sorry. I see where you're forgiving a $175,000 debt to Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation. I went on their website, and at one of their villas, it says that they were only allowed to live there for 8 years and had to move. Are you aware of that kind of restraint on housing? I'm going to call them to see if I can get further clarification. But I'm asking this board if you are aware that in one of their villas, they can't live there any longer than 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then we have another one, Carol Dean, for number 8? No? You want to do that one? Okay. Okay. We're looking at consent. Do we have a motion to move the consent?
Second.
Okay. David, aye. Okay, so move the consent. And now we have public comments. We do have a card for number 8. Mr. Williams.
Forgive me till I bring my 100 pounds of papers to the county papers.
You're pretty strong if you can carry that like that for the 100 pounds. So.
I could use a helper. Carol Dean Williams, you could get me a rubber stamp. I had to fill out so many papers this morning. My hand got a little tired. I want to talk about your campaign finance ordinance. Steve Bennett, in a matter of 2 weeks, illegally collected $69,570. Form 460. Right here it is. I think, Ms. Long, you're the swing vote on this. Can you approve of a supervisor in a matter of 2 weeks illegally collecting $69,570, but he had to return the money? Look at, there's over 13 pages of refunds here that he had to refund illegal money. I wonder what Fred Roseman and Gail Roseman thinks. One's attorney, law office of Fred Roseman. I wonder what they thought when they got the return contribution. I'm going to be calling this list and talk to these people because our champion of campaign finance reform, this is just unbelievable. So I have several other items I'll reserve my time for. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Board comments? Would you like to start?
Sure. I have a number of items here I'd like to make some comments on. One, I know we're starting the conversion over from plastic to, so I have my glass, and I think we have some of our paper cups here, and I'm looking forward to us making this conversion complete. I did pick up one. We talked about both paper the plastic bottles and the plastic bags. But in the interest of us trying to do something in Ventura County and getting the cities on board, I just wanted to offer this one statistic that I just came across this past weekend. In America, we use 88 billion plastic bags a year, and less than 10% of them end up getting recycled. They end up in the landfills, they end up littering all over the place. You see them blown up against the fences, et cetera. But it's an enormous statistic. So I think it is something that we definitely want to try to get a handle on in Ventura County, which would mean we'll have to do some things in coordination with our cities. The second thing I want to comment on is the voting system and the situation with the voting system that is out there. We're very fortunate that our clerk has a different system than what most other people have, that we have a paper trail, that we've been committed to having the paper trail all along. But when you see so many counties that are going to really be in trouble in terms of that, I would offer this perspective. I think there are times when you just should not have the profit motive be driving the system. And what we basically have is because companies want to have the proprietary right to protect their software, you can't really get the confidence. There are other industrialized countries, many of them use computerized voting, touch screen, but it's all open source. Anybody can go in and check the codes. And because they don't try to do this where somebody's trying to make a profit off of it, they don't have to worry about protecting somebody's private source. It just, for me, it makes no sense. I mean, you wouldn't do 911 based on the profit system. I don't know why you would do the most fundamental part of democracy, which is running your elections, and say, but we're not really going to let this be open to the public because we want somebody to be able to make a profit off of selling the computerized software system. So I think it's a fundamental flaw. We don't have it as bad as the others, but I think we still have that problem that is out there. The other things that I would comment on, I suspect that Supervisor Long may have some comments on this also, but we know that the Yes Chip program moving through Congress, very important for us here in Ventura County and for the children in Ventura County who are dependent upon that program for funding health insurance for them. Threatened veto at this point in time, and certainly hope that that isn't what happens. Matilaha Dam is in the Word of Bill. The Word of Bill has cleared the House, cleared the Senate, and now has cleared the Conference Committee, and has now gone back and cleared the House after it's cleared the Conference Committee. And the good news is that there are enough votes there to override the threatened veto by the President on the Word of Bill and on Matilaha Dam. So the final thing I would offer, and I'm sure Supervisor Long will have something about this, and that is the whole issue of the state budget and its impacts that are out there. But I think that we have to continue to ask the question is, does a 2/3 requirement to pass our budget, one of only 3 states in the union and the only large state that is using this system, does that really work for us here in California as we have this annual standoff going on? So those are my comments. Thank you for this opportunity to make that, and I'd like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on this list. And one of those people I'd like to call out was a bicycle accident that we had right here on Victoria in front of the Government Center, and it was Beth Dunn, 45-year-old clerk at Ralph's, and it was a hit-and-run accident while riding her bike on the way home from work. And we're really trying to encourage more and more people to get out of their cars and get on their bikes. She was very loved in the community, described by lots of people as very loyal to anybody who was a friend. She's a very giving person. And I think the whole idea of hit and run with bicyclists is a something we have to take seriously if we really want to get people out of their cars and onto their bicycles. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the extra time for the lengthy comments.
Thank you. Supervisor Long?
Yes, thank you. And I, too, have a few comments to make here, and I appreciate Supervisor Bennett raising those three issues. CSAC has weighed in on the Secretary of State's decision regarding the voting systems review because of the issues related to the counties and what will be a very tough challenge to do conversions in a short period of time. As was mentioned, we're in good shape, fortunately for our county and our election division leadership, that they were able to continue with a system that we believe provides the safeguards for the public and for the democratic process it represents in our voters. But it will be significant further discussion and challenges on that statewide conversion. And no question the S-chip is very important to us, and what we do, it's one of the priorities in our county is to provide for the health and welfare of children and families, and with that getting through the congressional process, it would just be a true disservice to children, and frankly should be embarrassing as a country that we're not able to continue with a program that has proven to be successful and to really support children in our community. So I would hope that does make it through the process, and we as a county are able to depend on a system and a program that we feel has been effective. The budget at the state, there's no question that there's been enough press coverage on it. The impact already in falling short by one vote to our nursing homes and to funds for our higher education. I know our agencies are very good at this, unfortunately, since we go through it far too often with our state budget not being settled on time, where we have to basically front funds to the programs that we're committed to, and trust that someday, some point in time, there will be a state budget. It sounds like it's very frustrating up there, and unfortunate that that's the way we do the business of providing government and leadership to our state, a state as big as California. So there's that soapbox. And I would certainly hope that our state delegation will do everything they can to get this budget issue resolved. The other thing I wanted to comment on, we had some coverage in the paper on a 24-hour exercise that our public health department put together that was in Operation Sunset, a surge exercise, and it was the first of its kind in the state. And I happened to get out there, as did Supervisor Bennett, and I think Cindy was also out there. They did an excellent job, and it drew people from all over the state to go through this exercise of what happens if, biological terror, something happens, and how are we prepared to respond for quarantining, being prepared for the medical response, obviously the usual law enforcement and EMS responses, but having it all on one site out at Freedom Park in Camarillo gave you a big picture of what it will take in the way of the organizational skills of cooperation of agencies, and where to stage something on this scale. And the representative that came in from the state was just so impressed with the leadership shown by our public health and many other county agencies to put this exercise together and to have it staged here and to go through the process of the worst case what if. So anyway, I think it was excellent and kudos to public health for doing it. And I know that there will be learnings that will come out of the exercise, and I'm sure we'll hear about that in some report of some form. So I had an opportunity to pop in there, and I thought it was very good that they did that. I know that in the paper, and all of us are watching again what's going on with St. John's Hospital, and in talking with Michael Powers yesterday, just to get another update as to our role in being prepared for the closure and the process that St. John's is going to go through with their tenting and their treatment on the mold issue. Assured again that we are as prepared as we possibly can be, that when working with St. John's there will be informational officers at various posts around the campus. They will certainly be there to respond to anyone who shows up at that campus. They are looking for, or they have agreements certainly with all our EMS systems, and Gold Coast Ambulance is planning on additional paramedic resources for the area. And certainly I know that our team is fully briefed and prepared, and I know everyone just really, and it's not just hope, because hope means you're not planning, and I believe that St. John's has been planning to get through this and do what is best for the operations of the hospital, but also for the county residents. So I expect you've all called to see what's the status on it. And the last thing I'd like to mention is I just returned from a conference. It's the first time I've attended this conference, and this is the 9th year where it's been sponsored by the OJJDP, called Underage Drinking Enforcement Training. And it was a conference, 3-day conference that was frankly one of the better conferences I've attended in a while in both its organization and its content and its participation. It had representatives from all over the nation who are working on a variety of techniques and tools to address the issues related to underage drinking in our communities and the impacts of that underage drinking. And we had, I was really very excited to be part of and proud that we had over 33 representatives from our county. 8 cities sent people, whether law enforcement or elected officials, to this conference. And they, and for 3 days we listened again to success stories, new tools that are being looked at and put in place in counties and cities throughout the nation to address underage drinking. And the one that we're so very successful at, we were recognized by this conference leadership, the OJJDP, for our Success Story Recognition Award presented to California, specifically to our Ventura County Behavioral Health Department and Ventura County Limits Project. And this was for our social host ordinance, which has now been adopted by all 10 cities and the county, and leading the way with that, and the recognition for enforcing underage drinking laws program for innovation and perseverance in reducing underage drinking. And so at the closure of the conference and the plenary session, all of us got up on the stage, and it was very exciting to be recognized nationally for this. Leadership of certainly Dan Hicks and Kathy Staples and Jeff Dean from the Sheriff's Office, and again the 33 people who were there, and we're there to really look at what successfully have we done, what do we do next with the success of the social host ordinance. So I'll share this with you. There have been over 50 citations using that ordinance, so it is working. And I know that there's been articles of a house experience in Camarillo where there was kind of an enactment of what goes on with house parties with underage drinking. There's going to be one put on in Thousand Oaks, and I know there's an interest in other parts of the community to do this. And one of the other new things, and I just have to take another moment here, I have a visual. Okay, I'm going to put this out here and this out here, and I want someone to tell me which can is a can of beer without looking close up. But, I mean, just generally looking at it. You can't tell. And there was a whole session, numerous sessions throughout the conference on what is called Alco Pops. And this is a new beer called Sparks. It does say it is a premium malt beverage. It has 7% alcohol, which is higher than some beers, but it is packaged so it looks like a youthful energy drink. This is an energy drink. And the issue with Alco Pops is it's a national issue, and it's one that the state, there's a whole state advocacy group, the California Coalition on Alco Pops and Youth, that is going to be targeting both our legislative leadership and the Board of Equalization regarding how we tax Alco Pops. Because the Alco Pop is basically, it's being right now presented as a beer, an alternative beer for our young people, because they did some studies in the market and found that girls don't like beer, so they're developing these friendly, tasty drinks that girls will like. And the Alco Pops are packaged as beers, but in essence they are distilled liquor, and they're being taxed as a beer. And the difference in the tax at the state level between a beer and a distilled liquor to this state is $45 million. So there's an entire advocacy group that's really going after the Board of Equalization, and there's 2 pieces of legislation that will look at taxing this as truly what it is, which is an alcohol and not a beer, and trying to get those monies dedicated for additional prevention programs for intervention and dealing with underage drinking. So I think this was, it's just amazing what I saw at that conference, and there were a huge contingent of youth that's under the youth leadership group of this conference, that they participate in the conference and they come out of it to tell adults what's going on in their life, how they experience these things, and what we should be doing to help to protect them. Probably, I'll be bringing this back to the board, the work of this conference and the work of our Ventura County Limits Group in September, with a report out on the success of our ordinance and other things, and what some next steps are. I just was pretty shocked by this, having a 17-year-old. And of course I showed this to my son, and he said he doesn't like beer, so, which he's 17, like, it's what he's going to tell his mother anyway. So yeah, that's what he's going to tell his mother, and I didn't give him the option to pick one of these cans. So you know, I just think that we need to pay attention to what's going on in marketing of beverages to our youth. It's pretty startling. So it was a well worth conference, and that's the end of my comments, and thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. Good comments. I too have been impressed in my short time being with the county of the preparedness and the quality of the people and their, as you had talked about in some of this. And it's just good to see. As a matter of fact, going back to the hospital situation, we had all the CEOs of all the hospitals come into our office, and we talked about a couple other things, but one of the things was how they've all worked well together to be prepared for this situation. And it sounds like there's a possibility that this could extend a little longer than they're hoping, based on some of these permits of this stuff they're going to use to get rid of the mold. So it's good to see people working well together from a disaster standpoint. And that's been great to see. Talking to other people from other counties, we don't always have our public safety work so well together, and some of them. So that's good. I'm excited to see that. Our last meeting, I said I was going to be out of the country, and the reason I was out of the country on July 25th, 26th, was I had the opportunity to be out on the aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln, so I think it was more than 100 miles offshore, so I guess you're out of the country, as our county council had said. But it was a great opportunity to observe the professionalism and bravery of our young men and women aboard the Lincoln. And it was really interesting to watch the precision of these aviators as they land those jets on that aircraft carrier. That was exciting. And it's exciting to watch during the day, but you should see it at night when you can barely see them come in and do this. And if they do miss that hook dragging across that, sparks flying everywhere, and they bring you right down onto that deck. And from me to Supervisor Long, that's how far you are away when they're landing those aircraft. The fuel and everything, it's crazy. It is crazy. And I think the Admiral had said there's no place more dangerous than standing right here, except maybe the flak jacket on in Iraq. So, but it was just amazing to watch. I think the average age was 20 years old on this ship, or maybe 21, and the ability of these kids to manage and do that. And the other thing I didn't realize, that there is only 14 aircraft carriers in the world. We own 12. The French own 1, and I think the British own 1, but they can't land like we can land. Nobody can land those aircraft that we can do that. It's something that we've been able to develop, and nobody else in the world can do it. And it just goes back to show you the ingenuity of our country, and it just goes back to show you how important what we can do here to make sure that naval base stays here, and how important those things are to us. So anyway, I want to thank my Captain Connors for the opportunity to be out there and to participate and realize how important the things they do are to us here in this county. So I also wanted to adjourn in memory of a few of these people here, but a couple of them. We had a police officer that was killed out in Simi, Mike Selleck, and he was a very important person. Los Angeles Police Department. He was a Boy Scout leader, did a lot, and he was killed in a tragic motorcycle accident. And on top of that, we also had another young man, Tyler Broberg, who got killed in a swimming accident. Tyler, he played football, water polo, band, choir. He was an honor student, one of those, kids. He was an Eagle Scout. those are just tragic things to hear about, young kids' lives taken that early in there. So anyway, those, I'd like to adjourn in memory of those, and those are my comments.
Supervisor Foy, if I could, during this break, I'll be gone to Indianapolis for a week in the middle of that, and I think I'm supposed to announce that since I'll be out of state right now. Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, I too will be out of the state in North Carolina for a week. Yep.
And we got 9:30s coming up, so maybe we can get through some of these. And let's see here. Pardon? 40. Yeah, we can go. I was trying to see if we, yes, let's go. Oh, there she is. Okay. Great. Bring up number 40.
Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board, and Mr. Johnson. This is Melanie Roy from the Behavioral Health Department. The item number 40 is asking for your ratification and approval of our state DMH standard MHSA agreement, which we received in February of 2007. The agreement includes our 06-07 allocation, our 07-08 allocation, and one-time funds, and it's approximately $16.5 million. The scope of the work contained in the agreement was outlined in the multi-year MHSA plan that was approved by your board on November 22nd.
Okay. Do you have any questions or a motion?
The recommended action.
Okay. It's approved.
Thank you.
Great.
Item 41 is asking, there are three recommendations. The first is to ratify and approve and authorize me to sign contracts for mental health services. There's multiple contracts. They've all been outlined in the board letter. The second item is for two EPSDT pass-through contracts, Aspira, Foster Family, and Services United. And the third item is for the Sylmar Health and Rehab Center, contract with them for an IMD beds.
Okay. Do you have any questions on this? A motion?
Move the recommended action.
Okay.
Thank you.
Passed. Great. Thank you. 42.
Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board, Mr. Johnston, Judy Rivera-Weber with the Human Services Agency. I'm before you today to ask for your board to ratify and approve a transitional housing program plus services for emancipated youth. It is a contract with a work training program. Total amount of the contract is $180,000. It is 100% state funded.
Great. I'd like to hear that. Any questions?
I don't have questions. I do want to offer my compliments. I mean, the board clearly in the last 12, 18 months has elevated this, and I want to give kudos to staff for turning this into actual action. But I think we're seeing more and more situations where staff is grabbing opportunities to try to come up with housing for emancipated youth, and it's a crisis that we have out there. It's a crisis that's getting better because of this involvement, and I look forward to more of this happening. I know we have other things going on. We funded, with the additional budget funding that we put in, and that social worker is really starting to focus on emancipated youth and the training and stuff. So I think we're making progress there. So my compliments to staff. Thank you. I'd like to move the recommended action.
Great.
Thank you.
That's approved. Thank you. Okay. We go to 43. You got to be able to do this. Marty's not here. We're going to. Can you do that? Okay.
Go ahead.
44 then. Yeah, that's just a straight reappointment.
We have a card.
Oh, here we go. We have a card on 44 first. Carol Dean Williams has a comment. You've got 2 minutes and 16
2 minutes and 15 seconds. Carol Dean Williams, I'd like to speak to this appointment or reappointment. When I filed a complaint against one of the supervisors for violation of the campaign ordinance, Ms. Rainier was assigned to it when there had to be probable cause. She said that the supervisor violated the ordinance and then ruled there was no probable cause. This is the person that you're considering to reappoint. Can you believe that? She said the ordinance was violated, but found no probable cause. The operating procedures adopted by that commission, Article 9, Standards of Conduct. A commissioner shall perform his or her duty without bias or prejudice. Well, was she biased or prejudiced against me or against the supervisor that she let off the hook after ruling they were guilty? They, the commissioners, shall support the mission goals and objective of the Ventura County Campaign Finance Ethics Commission. Article 14, disqualification of commission members, Section 14.01. Any member of the commission is subject to disqualification for bias, prejudice, interest, or for any other reason for which a judge may be disqualified for cause in a court of law. Well, I'm very familiar with disqualifying judges in a court of law, and the average citizen that reads this has no clue to what that is. And I would submit you continue this item and let me write a verified written statement under oath against Miss Reginaire and let her answer under oath before you approve this corrupt commissioner.
Time's up. Thank you for your comments. Okay, so we have a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yes, I would move the recommended action. I believe the independent selector was the original judge, retired judge, who chose Ms. Renier from a pool. And Ms. Renier has been recognized many times for her exemplary work, her integrity, and her ability to serve in a very open and ethical process. So I have no question of her ability to serve.
Second.
Okay. Good. That's approved. We'll go back to 43 since Marty came in. Thank you.
I apologize
That's
for
all right.
being out of the boardroom. Today, we are revisiting the issue of adopting an ordinance, reestablishing the assessment hearing officer, and to thereby increasing the value of cases before the assessment and hearing officer process. We are also changing the ordinance so that it tracks state law, so that we don't have to come back and do this every time the state law adjusts how much the assessment hearing officer can hear. So that's what we're asking your board to do today.
So what you're saying, we're just going to go from the 100,000 to the 500,000, which is allowed by state law?
Right. What happened was you adopted an ordinance, and then a couple years later, the state increased the maximum, but we had been operating under the lower maximum for several years. And what we are doing is we're increasing the maximum today. We're basically asking you to adopt an ordinance that tracks state law. So you don't have to come back and change it to 500. You just have to put this ordinance in place, and it will track what the state allows.
Great. That's good efficiency. Okay. Is there a motion?
Move the recommended action.
Great. And approved? Wonderful.
Title of the ordinance. An ordinance to the Ventura County Board of Supervisors reestablishing an assessment hearing officer in Ventura County.
No public cards. Great. Okay. We do number 45, reappointment here.
Good morning, board members. Mr. Johnston, Del Tompkins with the County Executive Office. Item 45 contains 3 recommendations for your consideration today. Recommendation number 1 is reappointment of 2 members to the Tobacco Settlement Allocation Committee. That would be Laura Flores Espinosa as the labor representative and Diane Molnar as the mental health representative. Recommendation number 2 is an appointment to the Tobacco Settlement Allocation Committee. Ms. Mr. Gerald R. Curie, who is Vice President of the Hospital Association of Southern California, would take the place of Monty Clark as the hospital's representative. On the allocation committee, he would serve a 2-year term ending June 30th of 2009, as would both Ms. Espinosa and Ms. Molnar, who would be reappointed to 2-year terms ending June 30, 2009. The third and final recommendation of this item concerns reappointments for your Finance, Tobacco Settlement Allocation Finance Committee. There are 3 members on that committee. 2 of them are currently eligible for reappointment, Mr. Dan Goldstein and Mr. Greg Ramirez. They would serve 2-year terms, also ending June 30th, 2009.
Okay, great. Do you have any comments or questions?
I'll second that, and also realize you didn't get to comment on item 44, but I assume you were simply going to make the recommended action there. So,
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. It's approved. Do we have time to do 46 with the public hearing? Do you think? Do you? Okay. All right. We'll move to 46 and commence public hearing and adoption of the 2007-09 agreement between the county and the Services Employees International Union.
Good morning, Mr. Foy, members of the board. We're bringing before you for its first reading the agreed upon memorandum of agreement between Ventura County and the Service Employees International Union. As you are aware, this is the county's single largest union with slightly over 4,000 members in all 31 of our agencies. This is a multi-year agreement. It actually turns out to be 27 months. It is an agreement that has a total value over the period of the 3 years of a little over 8.5%, with an annualized value of about 3.7% in both salaries and benefits and additional items related to uniforms and temporary pay assignments. The provisions in this contract provide for cost of living increases as well as meeting our market-based standard. So the raises range anywhere from 7.5% to a total of over 19% based on market. And that has to do primarily with technical positions. There were over 290 individual language changes in this contract. Negotiations took from April until almost the end of July. But we were able to reach a full multi-year agreement that we believe meets our standard for being competitive in the marketplace and having a fair compensation structure that allows us to recruit and retain qualified individuals in the 700 and some odd titles this unit represents.
Could you just go back again over the market-based adjustments? You say some individuals receive between 7% and 19% increase?
Yes, sir.
Right. And I just would like to, for the benefit of the public, point out that very similar. Our managers overall received a 3% increase, but some managers received market-based adjustments. It's just that when our managers received those market-based adjustments last fall, we certainly got a lot of news about managers getting 9% increases. I suspect we won't get news about SEIU employees getting between 7% and 19% market-based adjustment increases. But it's important for the public to recognize that the average manager received a 3% increase and the average SEIU workers receiving a 3% increase. Some managers who were behind received market-based adjustments that were higher. Some SEIU employees received market-based adjustments that are higher. The one is, is probably newsier for out there rather than what's happened, but it is important, I think, that we set the record straight about all managers didn't receive these big increases at the expense of the workers. Thank you.
I would move the recommended action, and I appreciate the good work. I know it was a long and tough table, but I think the goals of doing the best we can for employees, for both recruitment and retention, and to have a fair salary that represents market, were upheld. So thank you for your good work.
Thanks very much.
John, you may have already said this, but just out of an abundance of caution, this is similar to, I believe, the firefighters contract a while back where the negotiation period was during the summertime. Your board goes dark. This is being brought to you now. The unions, have they yet counted all their votes?
As indicated in the board letter, their vote won't be completed until the 10th of August.
Right. So the reason I'm just highlighting this, so there isn't any question, we're bringing this to you now based on the tentative agreement. The union is will count their votes. When you return from your break, this matter will be brought back a second time, at which time we will have the response from the union, which we expect to be approved. If it isn't approved, of course, then you won't go forward, and that the overall value of this package is within the guidelines and the actuarial assumptions currently being used, in our retirement system. Is that correct, John?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Christine, do you have some comments?
I just wanted to add for the record that we are still reviewing the language and working with Mr. Nicole's unit based on a letter I issued on July 2nd and August 2nd for areas where we have concern on interpretation of the actual language. We hope to get that resolved before this comes back to the board.
Right, and that won't have any effect on what the union's voting on?
No, sir.
No, that's just more between management.
It's clarification of issues that should be easily resolved.
Great, great. I do, too, want to make comments as going through this my first time through it, and I want to thank you and for all your hard work, and the CEO's office and the union for working, trying to work well together and do that, and also for the county being fair. I mean, when you hear some of these 19% increases, that's a big jump. In some, I know it's very few jobs, but you don't always have to do that. I know coming from the private sector, you don't always have to make it up like that, but I want to say that the county's being fair and spending money on that, and it's good to see that there's a balance there, and I agree that sometimes the managers make more news than the employees, but I think it goes both ways, and I know the CEO and you, John, have done a good job to try to make it fair for everybody. So that's great to hear. So we had a motion and to receive. Second. Good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And why don't we go ahead and ask our Girl Scouts and their adult mentors to go ahead and come on down to the front here as we get started. We'll use our 1 minute, right, to set the scene here. You can just move right across there and, stop about there. That would be great. Okay. Wonderful. All right. I'm really pleased to get to do this as our first 9:30 item, and I'm not sure whether the girls are really pleased that we're doing this now in the summertime instead of during the school year when they could have been out of school for some time. But one of the nice things about this is that hopefully they're still on summer vacation. But I'd like to tell you about this pretty remarkable program here. But these are 6 Ventura Junior Girl Scouts, and what they've earned, and they're with Troop 852, and they've earned the Bronze Award because they've completed the Bronze Award project, and it benefits Ventura County's Medical Center. And do we have somebody from the Medical Center here? Yeah, there we are. There's Kurt right there. You should all be aware that the Girl Scout Bronze Award, that's the highest award that a junior Girl Scout can earn. The award demonstrates that the girls understand and live by the Girl Scout law by making a promise to help others, improving their community and world, and becoming the best they can be. The Bronze Award is the first in a series of 3 Girl Scout awards, including the Silver Award and the Gold Award, and we hope to have you 5 come back when you get your Silver Award and when you get your Gold Award later when you are not junior Girl Scouts, but you're Girl Scouts. The girls are all 5th graders from Ventura: Taylor Fountain, Dana Friedman, Sarah Jackson, Amanda Johnson, Angela King, and Natalie Smith. The adult mentors are Lynn Fontaine, Debbie Leader, and Rose Hayden Smith. For their project, these 5 girls began last fall, and they created a mobile book library for patients in the pediatric wing at the Ventura County Medical Center. And they met monthly. The troop raised money through cookie sales, donations to purchase a book browser, cart, and books. The books that they purchased, including books in Spanish for non-English speakers, were combined with books currently owned by BCMC into a mobile library, and then they grouped them into age-appropriate reading bins, and they presented the book cart to the hospital staff on May 30th. As part of the Bronze Award requirements, the girls completed more than 30 separate activities to earn 6 Girl Scout badges, including Lead On books, Girl Scouting in My Future, Girl Scouting in the USA, The Sign of the World, and a Girl Scout Reader Patch. Troop 852 is affiliated with the Tres Condos Girl Scout Council, and it's really a pleasure for us to be here to present you with some certificates, which I'm going to come down. But before I do that, I want to point out that Supervisor Parks, who couldn't be here today, is donating this book, and that's Black Beauty, to the mobile library. I have this book that's in it's a book for Spanish readers, and it's Bulldog La Monda Noel, and Supervisor Foy has?
Harry Potter.
He brought Harry Potter, right? Certainly very appropriate. And Supervisor Long, and it's probably as popular as Harry Potter is, it's probably good to have both of them there, right?
It's so wonderful.
So I'd like to invite the other supervisors to come down with your books, and we'd like to present these awards to our 6 Girl Scouts. I'm going to ask Mr. Watson to come up and help us with these awards, and have our adult leaders. Are all 3 of you here? Great, yeah. Rose is not here. Oh, Rose is not here? Great. Come on over for... I'm going to... One of the girls is not here? Sarah. Okay. All right. I'll read the award, hand them one to Supervisor Long, one to Supervisor Foy, and pass them out that way. And the first award goes to Taylor Fountain, right? And Dana Friedman, and Sarah Jackson. She's the one who's not here. All right. Amanda Johnson, Angela King, and Natalie Smith. Right. And I think we're going to shake your hands and ask you to come right over here for a picture. Why don't you come over here? The adults will be behind, right? And you guys right here in front of us, right? I think Anna, if you come over here. Thank you very much. I just finished. Oh. I know. And we have one final thing. Would any of you like to say anything about the mobile cart, or would any adults mentor like to say anything to us?
Natalie, she swears Natalie. She's our good speaker.
All right, Natalie. It's a chance of a lifetime. Natalie, come on up and tell us just a little bit about how you guys went about doing this.
Well, we first organized how we were going to do it, and then we figured out what we were going to do, how much it was going to cost. And I think we took some money from the Girl Scout funds to buy the cart. So we bought the cart, and then we bought some books, and we organized the books and threw away some of the old books that were torn up. And then we presented the cart.
They worked really hard. They did a great job. Sundays.
And
on behalf of the hospital, I just want to thank the girls and, of course, their parents and leaders who helped put this project together. It was really kind of inspirational to see the girls not just come in and work on a project, but actually think about the patients, think about what the patients needed, and put together a project that really, we think, improves the quality of the experience for our patients at the hospital. And again, thank you to Supervisor Bennett and Cindy Cantel for putting this together and putting us together, and also to Mike Powers of the Healthcare Agency for giving us the inspiration and the guidance to work with these girls and get this great project done. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Will you add these books to the library for us, please? There you go. A book for each year. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Well done, girls.
Well done. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that was great. It's always good to see those young ladies. I don't know if I could ever earn those kind of merit badges I see in these Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. But now we got Supervisor Long. You've got something else. Some nice young ladies have come in to see us.
Thank you. You couldn't miss them when they walked
No.
in. I was just so excited when I read in the paper that our local teens danced to win an Irish dance championship. And I thought, I've seen them dance before, and I thought, this is so wonderful for us, for them to represent us, but for them to put so much into what they do in their dance and their performance and preparation, which is hours and hours and hours and hours, to bring them into so they could be recognized. It was truly magical. We have championship ladies here who, from the 2007 North American Irish Dance Championship, we have winners. We have Maggie Darlington, and if you would please come to the front. Maggie Darlington, who won the 2007 North American Irish Dance Championship in ladies 17 to 18 division, her third major world championship in a single year. Then we have Devon Nishida, who added to the excitement of this by placing second in the same division. But not to be outdone, we have Melanie Sanderson, who won in her division, which was ladies 17 and under. So again, first place, Maggie Darlington, North American Irish Championship, Dance Championship, World Irish Dance Champion, and All Ireland Championship for 2007. And Devon, again, the North American Irish Dance, second place, 17 to 18 division. Melanie, first place, North American Irish Dance, 17 and under division. And I have, I know with them, is Marie O'Connell? Marie? Yeah. Maura, I'm sorry. Boy, I should know that. Look in the spelling, Maura, I'm sorry. And please tell us about the dance troupe. But I have seen them individually. They're always so open to coming and performing in the community and throughout the county. And they're not a little-known secret. We in Camarillo are very familiar with them. And you know, the only thing I can give you the visual on is if you've ever seen river dance or something. When they dance, they fly. They're just off their toes and I wish you could hear them in this room, but you won't really be able to. I might want to do a step or two.
I said, are you going to get to see something here?
But the costuming and the preparation they do and the work they do is just phenomenal. And to be winners, I thought it would be great to bring them in and recognize them. So I'll step down to bring the certificates, and if you'd like to, please share with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you, Steve. Thank you, Kathy. The school started in my garage in Ventura 21 years ago. We have now gone on to be over 300 strong with 7 locations, 6 in Southern California and 1 studio in Salt Lake City, Utah. We are hosting this weekend in Westlake Village our annual competition at the Westlake Hyatt. We have 700 dancers coming in from all over the States, and we have judges and musicians coming in from Ireland, England, Canada, all over. These dancers in front of you are 3 of our top girls. Maggie Darlington was the only North American dancer to win the World Championship this year in Glasgow, Scotland at Easter. And she has, as the newspaper called it, done the trifecta in the 1 year, the All-Ireland Championship, the World Championship and the North American Championship. And the other girls, Melanie Sanderson, this was her first win at the North American Championships. We were very excited. And then Devon coming second. It was a phenomenal event, and this year the event was held in Ottawa, Canada, over the July 4th weekend. We also do a lot of team dancing, and these girls all competed at the World Championships in teams, coming as high as second place in the Worlds. We've still got to win the Worlds in a team, but we've been seconds, thirds, fourths. We're knocking at the door. There are people who never knew where Ventura was, who now know. Ventura County is the Clara School of Irish Dancing, and we're a very formidable group internationally.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathy.
And we're going to take a picture and a bio. Congratulations. I know everyone would like to see you do a few steps, but I'm not sure how effective it is if you don't have that hard floor.
I should explain that we are the Clara School of Irish Dancing. The Clara is the traditional Irish wedding ring. And one of you step out here. Who's got the biggest one? Maggie, you do on the back of your dress. The Clara ring is the traditional Irish ring with the hands, heart and crown symbolising love, loyalty and friendship. This is our emblem that we wear on all of our costumes. Our class costumes when we dance in teams are all identical. They are maroon and white, the colours of the county of Galway in the west of Ireland where I grew up. But then each one of the girls, when they design their own solo dresses, and they're all made in Dublin, Ireland, they put the Clara ring on them as well. But we do buy the fabric in the garment district in LA. We send it to Ireland.
One of those little girls over there is one of Zoe Games, one of yours. And she's doing her very first competition this Sunday. Really? So we didn't know about this book, but we think it's about it now.
That's exciting. Great.
They used to cry. Rock and rollers on that. Don't tell your secret. Now you know. Thank you for coming.
Yes.
So proud of you. Thank you. We wish you well. Keep up.
Well done, ladies.
Thank you.
How about if we move on to 47, receive our grand jury report.
Good morning. What is submitted before your board today is the response to a grand jury report that was issued on the Ventura County employee recruitment and promotion practices. This report was issued prior to the final grand jury issuance of all the reports, and therefore this response has been prepared for your approval to be submitted to the presiding judge. If you have any questions, I'll entertain them at this time.
Do we have any questions or comments? Do we have a...
Move the recommended action.
Good. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Move to 48.
Let's see, David's here and Norman. Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the board, the item number 48 is sort of a long-suffering issue here in the county. It goes back into the 1990s where there was a disputed billing. Cost Pacifica reported to us that they believed that there were some errors in the billing. I noticed in the newspaper or the news coverage of it, they keep referring to it as an overbilling, which sounds like it was being billed for things not provided. And I want to just clarify at the outset that this is not a billing for things not provided. These were services received, performed by Casa Pacifica. The question was whether they were within the explicit terms of the contract and whether or not they became eligible for state, and I don't know, state and federal reimbursement. I know at least state reimbursement. As you'll recall, back in the late 90s, there was the issue at the hospital over compliance. There were some penalties over some Medi-Cal issues. Out of an abundance of caution, the county immediately reimbursed the state for the amount in dispute, and Casa Pacifica reimbursed the county for that same amount of money regarding the Medi-Cal. The remainder of the bill, $460-some thousand, has continued to be questioned. I don't know whether Mr. Clemens was here earlier. He has been a long critic, I guess, of the process or the services, but my office's feeling is after having spent the better part of 10 years with 2 separate audits, one conducted by our auditor controller, one conducted by an outside audit, that it's not a matter of whether the services were provided and the values. That has all been determined, but technically they were outside the explicit terms of the original contract in effect back in the 90s. Because of the unique relationship between Casa Pacifica and the county and the services they provide, which continue to be important services, it seemed that it would be in the best interest of the taxpayers rather than to spend money on a continued dispute or legal settlement, since this cannot be mutually agreed to, that we think it's probably in the best interest of everyone to just accept the fact that the services were provided, the taxpayers did benefit, and that we continue to maintain the partnership and relationship. In the meantime, Mr. Elson is here, Dr. Elson. His organization has changed some of their accounting practices and the tracking system. The Human Services Agency has worked closely with their organization over some of the criticism about placement. We have a greater participation in that kind of review. And so at this point, it seems that everything's better served to put this to rest. So that is why I brought it forward to you. There's some staff is here to answer questions, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Move the recommended action.
Second. Okay, and I want to go along with that too. And one of the things I noticed is when I got involved here at the county, seeing some of this, is it sounds like the services that were performed, and if they weren't performed by Costa, we were going to pay somebody else to do those services anyway during that time. So,
or the services would not have been available.
Wouldn't have got done, but we realized that's the services that we wanted. Then we've added it to our contract.
Well, yeah, that one is not quite as clear because this thing has taken on a life of its own over, like I said, a 10-year period. I think this started like back in '97. The way in which funding is provided, the way in which streams of income that we receive and where these go. In some cases, the money goes directly to school districts. So it's kind of hard to compare an apples to apples, but some of those services are have continued to be desired and are included, not all of the services. So it's kind of the best solution we can come up with. I do want to recognize Dick is not here, Mr. Clemens, who has been talking to our office off and on for a number of years. He was one of the people who was pushed for audits. I'll give him some credit for that. I don't know all of the history of it. When I arrived, Mr. Hufford was dealing with it, and he inherited it from the days when Mr. Koster, I guess, was here. So anyway, it's not an absolute clear trail unless Steve wants to or David want to add anything to it, but I think that it's about as close as government can approximate without continuing to spend the bureaucratic process on something that is not serving the children or the taxpayers. So,
yeah. Mr. Chair, just to add comment that from the beginning, certainly is when I became aware of this, there's never been a question that services were received or not received. They were received. And I think from the beginning, this board, and before I sat here, and others, worked very hard in the partnership to bring Casa Pacifica to our county, and it truly is a safety net that we could not duplicate. as effectively, as professionally, as well as we do to really create such a home for children and services that are offered out there. So again, it's not a question of whether services were received. It's frankly, in my thinking, some paperwork snafus. So I appreciate that this has been brought forward to us so we can finally put it to rest and move on, because there's no question that CASAS is invaluable to what we do in this county for the children.
Right. Good. Good. Okay. Well, that passes. Thank you. Okay. We'll go to 49, which was a recommendation to appoint 2 new members to fill 2-year vacancies, and the child care planning.
Move the recommended action.
Okay. That passes. And then number 50.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is my recommendation to appoint Irene Totten to serve on the Alcohol and Drug Advisory Board. Mrs. Totten has extensive background in the field of behavioral health, and is very interested in what we're going to be doing through our mental health services plan and what we do with the alcohol and drug advisory work, and is very willing and able to serve. That's my recommended motion.
Okay, good. All right. Passes. And then I've got one myself, reappointing Pat Haven to the Cultural Heritage Board and Patricia Navarro to our HIV/AIDS Advisory Committee, and Bill Dorado to our first 5.
Second.
Great. Okay. And then, all right, 50. We got a few minutes. 52 for our landfill fees.
Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board, Mr. Johnston. For the record, I am Bruce Belusky with the Integrated Waste Management Division. The item now before you is the annual county surcharge fee adjustment at the Simi Valley landfill for calendar year 2008. This rate increase is provided by the board-approved 2002 county agreement with Waste Management relating to the operation of the Simi Valley landfill. The suggested 3.2% rate increase of 7 cents per ton is based upon an independent survey of 30 active landfills within California and the mean market rate of these landfills based upon posted gate rates. Average monthly UA, unincorporated area, residential waste collection rates will increase approximately 1 to 2 cents. The requested increase will generate approximately $47,000 in additional general purpose revenue in fiscal year 2008. Total estimated general purpose revenues from the county surcharge fee will be approximately $2.5 million for fiscal year 08. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Can I ask one question, though?
Yes.
On these fees, when you do that, these fees are covering our expenses? I mean, fees are based to cover expenses. We don't add fees unless our expenses go up, or is this just a revenue piece to us?
Just a revenue going to general fund.
General fund. Mm-hmm. But I thought is there some state law that says we can only charge fees equal to cover our costs? And I'm sure we're not covering costs, but is there something out there about that?
We can only charge fees to the government to cover the cost of the services we directly provide.
That we directly provide. So is this something that...
This is beyond that. This is a contractual.
Contractual agreement. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. I knew there was some law on that, but this is a contractual agreement. Okay.
It's a little bit like selling a franchise agreement. You know, I mean, somebody who wants to benefit from this paid for this right.
Paid for this right. And that's what we're doing. We have these agreements. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, that's approved then. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you want a break? Yeah. I'm not sure we get through this. All right. We'll take a 5-minute break till 10 o'clock.
My pleasure this morning to welcome to the boardroom a Camarillo, not just a Camarillo soccer team, but an Eagles Soccer Club of Camarillo. And the reason I invited them in this morning is because they are champions. They are the United States Youth Soccer Under-17 champion for all of the United States. As already this morning we've had our young Girl Scouts in, and just recently our young dancers from the Irish Clotter group. This is a skirts rule kind of morning. I just have to say that because we now have the Camarillo soccer team, and they've won the U.S. title again for United States Youth Soccer Under-17, and they did this in Frisco, Texas. They brought home the Laura Moynihan Cup Award. And this is, and I'll have the coaches here, Vince Thomas, and I'd like him to speak also. And I know we don't have all of our soccer players here because they are seniors and they're either off on vacation or headed off to college, but we do have some present and parents present. This is a relatively young club soccer group. And I think I recall being there when they first launched, and they have now in a very short time proven themselves to just be determined and real competitive and just very committed players, and to bring home this United States Youth Soccer Championship is just well worth inviting them into the boardroom to applaud them and congratulate them. So I'd like to step down. I'd like to invite Mr. Thomas, the head coach, up to the dais, and the soccer girls who are with us. I think we just have one this morning, but come on up and tell us about the Youth Soccer Club group, and I'll step down to present the certificates.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting us here and acknowledging what the girls have done. I'm actually from Ventura, and this is our captain of the team, Amelia Mathis, and she's also from Ventura. We pretty much, I know she's been born and raised here, and I pretty much have done the same. And just to give you a little bit of background, I've been the director for 8 years. Actually, when I came to the Eagles, we're based out of Camarillo. I started with Amelia's team, and they were U10. And at U14, we actually won our first national championship in Florida. And to give you an idea, to go up against the Giants in Orange County, given what they can choose from, and given our resources, basically, it's unimaginable what these girls have done. They're really, truly unique. I mean, they're definitely going to go down in history as one of the greatest teams to ever play youth club soccer. And what happened is after U14, at U15 and 16, the team that we beat at U14, Surf from San Diego, we met them again at U15 and U16 in the state championship game. And both games went to penalty kicks, and we lost both. And actually at U14, it went to penalty kicks, but we won. And so this year, again, I'm sure you guys know it takes a tremendous amount of character to not let that destroy you. When you've attempted it twice after you've wanted to do it again, and you've come up short. And the girls just bounced back and just worked harder than ever. And I don't know if any of you know Ralph Wilson, the chiropractor in town. He basically took on doing their fitness for them on my off days, on our off days. And anyways, we ended up playing a different team for the first time in 3 years in the state championship game, and we beat them 1-0. And in the regional championship game, we ended up playing Slammers from Newport Beach, and they upset the national champion in regionals. And the game went to overtime. We went to penalty kicks with them in Vegas, and we beat them. Our keeper saved the last PK to win the game for us. And then, as Kathy said, we went to Frisco, and we played the Dallas Texans in the championship game. And the Dallas Texans, to give you an idea, and Amelia knows this, I've always told the girls I thought they were the best team that we've ever played, because at U14 we saw them in a Portland tournament, and we beat them in the semis in overtime. But I think Amelia would admit it was the first time anybody totally outplayed us, but we beat them. So for me as a coach, I couldn't wait for the opportunity. I prayed for it, that we would get an opportunity to play the Texans in a game for the national championship, actually, and at U17, because it's the most prestigious age group to play a championship. And after U14, we played them 4 times and lost all 4 times. And I would say probably Saturday night in our team meeting is probably where we probably won that game. It was just powerful and emotional. And the next morning, the girls came out and scored first. They probably have the best forward that we've probably ever seen in the entire nation ever play the game. And our back line played phenomenal, but she tied up the game 1-1, and then right before half we went up 2-1 from a goal from one of our local girls, Emily Cressy, who actually goes to Buena here. And then we scored another goal to make it 3-1, and then their forward scored again to make it 3-2, and we held on and won the game 3-2, and it was just fantastic. It was a dream come true. So yeah, so to give you an idea what the girls have been through, that's what they've been through, and to take on a giant like that, you know, to think about what Dallas, I mean, just the resources they have, and to have a team from, their location is Camarillo, but again, we've got several girls from Ventura. Our keeper comes from San Juan Capistrano. We have 2 field players that come from Temecula and San Diego, and several girls from Camarillo. So that's basically what it's taken to put together a team that can compete against these giants. So thank you, for acknowledging these guys. And I don't know
Thank you for coming in. These are for all the girls and the coaches. We thank you. You brought great excitement and pride to us in our county.
Thank you very much. And this young lady is going to be going to UCLA. So.
Yeah. Let me get a picture of you guys. That's great.
Thank you to the parents. Wish you well. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I got one more. All right, so now we're at 33. Thank you.
Yes. And our recommendation is that you move forward with the public hearing at this time. The staff will make a presentation and take the public comments, and then we might have a modified recommendation at the end of that process. So that's
Okay.
what we recommend, the action.
Okay, so we'll open a public hearing right now. We've got a few cards here. Do yes.
Good morning, Chairman Foy, members of the board, Monica Nolan, County CEO's office. Before you this morning, as the board sitting as the redevelopment agency, you're being asked to approve a 5-year implementation plan and a 10-year housing plan for the Piru project area. Remember that this is a planning document, and that several places in the plan it states that this is for direction only, and that we'll be having to come back to the board when we have specific programs or funding issues to do with this plan. What I'd like to do briefly is just kind of go through, give you a little bit of a summary and context of the redevelopment agency, since I don't get to blow my horn too much, and then talk about the plan and what we hope to do with the plan. First of all, California redevelopment law states that redevelopment agencies have to adopt this plan once every 5 years, and in the case of housing plans, once every 10 years. The plan should contain specific goals and objectives for the project area, projected programs and projects, projected revenue, a report on the status of the area's low-mod housing fund, and a plan for expenditure of that fund. Now, if I can figure this out. The redevelopment project area was established in 1995 in response to the Northridge earthquake. At that time, there were over 50 buildings that were either yellow tagged or red tagged from the disaster. The redevelopment plan does not have the power of eminent domain, and it has a 20-year life and will sunset in 2015. The 2000 census stated that in that gray area, which is the project area boundaries, there were 502 dwelling units and 1,700 residents. There. During the past 12 years, the agency's work has mainly concentrated on eliminating infrastructure deficiencies that were either caused by or exacerbated by the earthquake. The choice of what projects to work on, and this is the list of projects that have been worked on in the past 12 years, was driven by a combination of available outside funding, community need, community desire, or economic revitalization. It's interesting to note that in all of these projects, tax increment was actually just used as a leverage for additional funds and was actually a minor part of the funding that occurred. The overall goal of the redevelopment plan is to undertake projects to repair, replace facilities and structures that were damaged as a result of the earthquake, and to perform actions necessary to mitigate the effects of other such disasters in the future. The programs and activities identified in this 5-year plan are intended to help facilitate the continuation of that goal. In general, the projects are grouped into one of 4 broad categories: public infrastructure improvement, economic stability, community safety, and housing, affordable housing. It should be noted that the list of projects is not exclusive and does not preclude the funding of other projects. This is an estimate of what the tax increment funds have been to the agency over the years and what they're projected to be through the next 5 years. And again, because of some mistakes that were found in Appendix A, we're going to have give another chance to look at that appendix, and your approval of this plan will be based more on a conceptual approval of the plan subject to revisions of Appendix A. But this does give you roughly an estimate of what we have to spend, which bottom line is not much. There is basically $2.2 million to do the projects that I'm going to discuss briefly. These are the capital projects. Under the first heading, which was eradication of blighting influences, these are the projects that we've identified as to be either be continued to work on or that needs to be worked on. In some instances, work has already begun on these projects. For example, the community drainage system, we're in design on phase 4 of the storm drains, which that back picture shows you what happened when we didn't have the storm drain in place. That's Center Street in Piru. Another project that is currently underway is Piru Creek stabilization, and that's a project where, again, it's the funds we're using, not tax increment funds at this time, but Watershed Protection District is actually funding that program. So this is an example of how we're using not only sources of tax increment, but government loans, CDBG money, and sources from other agencies within the county to help with these projects. This is another area, the creation of economic stability. The idea is that we want to have economic vitality in the town so that the town can turn around and be self-sufficient. And see, these don't have high dollar value so much as they're just projects that are better to try to revitalize the economy in the town. The third one has to do with community safety. Community safety is a very major concern of the Piru residents. And I think you've heard discussions on the second one, Highway 126 improvements. The Weed and Seed program, I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's kind of an interesting program. That's the name that's given to multi-agency neighborhood cleanups. The idea is to revitalize an area by getting all the agencies and the communities together to work together. So what we're talking about is a coordinated campaign of neighborhood watch, code enforcement, criminal arrest, and structural rehabilitation. And we've already taken steps to start that program, and the neighborhood's very excited about that. And then the fourth area has to do with to increase and improve the supply of affordable housing while also preserving the character of the community. By law, 20% of all tax revenue received within a redevelopment area must be used for the development and improvement of affordable housing for residents of very low, low, and even moderate incomes. These monies are deposited into a separate low-mod housing fund. And here's an example of the housing fund. And again, you can see that we're at approximately $600,000 now, and that's after 12 years of the agency. We haven't spent any of it. But we do project that numbers should double by the end of the 10 years. Now what I'd like to get into is the second stage of the strategic plan. There was the 5-year plan, and then there was the 10-year housing plan. The 10-year housing plan is actually divided into two what we call programs. One's a housing production program, which deals with the low mod fund that I just talked about. And we have to decide what are we going to do with this money and how we're going to spend it. And so what we've identified, we're proposing the investment of the agency's low mod funds into these three programs: an emergency and minor grants program, a substantial rehab loan program, and a new construction program. And these percentages speak more or less, well, they do speak to what we're proposing as the percentage. 10% of the fund will go toward the grant program, 60% to a rehab loan program, and then 30% to new construction. The emergency and minor repair grants, what we're proposing is that would be grants of up to $5,000 to underwrite the cost of rectifying immediate threats to public health. We heard at the public meeting that we had in Piru that the seniors have a lot of issues, and how can we get a rail in my bathtub, those types of issues. And so that's what the thought is with this emergency grant program. It would also dovetail with CDBG, with code enforcement programs, and CDBG right now is funding a code enforcement effort in Piru. And 10% of the funds would go toward this, and 10% would go a long way. The major part of the program, the housing production program, is to be the substantial rehab loans. The Piru is mainly composed of houses that are older than 50 years old. This is a typical example of housing in Piru, although I have to admit for this slide I did take one of the lower end houses to put up here. But what we're proposing is that we give equity share loans to finance major repairs. The assistance be capped at 50% of the replacement cost. There'd be an affordability clause built into the loan, which would then allow that when the house is sold, it would stay as an affordable home. And again, like I mentioned, 60% of the low mod funds would go toward that. And then the third component that we're projecting for the low mod funds is to go to new construction. And these would be new construction of affordable homes. And the idea is to assist, facilitate in the development of housing within the boundaries of not necessarily the project area, but the Piru area plan, or the Piru area community, which includes area adjacent to the project area. Again, we have a cap on the assistance per unit. We have an affordability clause. And then, like I said, 30% would go toward that. The second part of the housing plan has to do with what we call an affordable housing program. And this is looking not just at the low mod fund itself, but looking at the community and what really is happening out there. Significant growth in the Piru community is poised to occur. 62 acres to the south of the project area, there is a proposed 288-unit residential project, actually two projects. And to the east of the project area is a 66-unit farm worker project that's proposed. If both of those were built out, that would increase the current community size and population by 70%. So that really does have a significant impact to the existing community itself. So what we're recommending are these two recommendations. One is the adoption of a Piru area plan affordable housing program that embodies the redevelopment inclusionary policies that are by law there, and applies them to the area, not just within the project area, but the area outside the project area. Again, what we say is, don't just look at this, let's look at what's really there, the community itself. The other recommendation that's identified in the plan is the development of an optional in lieu fee program that will be available both within the redevelopment area and the expansion area. Again, the thought is that we can use the in lieu fees to look at a comprehensive program. Where are we going to put affordable units? And let's just look at this as one unit as opposed to two separate. Again, these are recommendations.
Could you explain a little bit more? How would the in lieu fee program work?
Well, that's to be developed at this point, but the thought is, at the recommended concept, the thought is instead of having, asking or requiring 15% affordable units being built with this project, 15% of affordable buildings being built with this project, while we have a major affordable housing project being built here that needs funds, let's look at creating an in lieu fee that gives the developers the option of paying so much instead of building this unit. That goes into the fund that then helps pay for this affordable housing project.
And whether we accept that or not, or like the in lieu fee, et cetera, that would all come later? Is that right? Okay.
Well, the recommendation to look at an in lieu fee is now, but what we're recommending is to do an affordable housing program, and that would be looking at what's happening with the area plan, because you'd have to do changes to the Piru area plan in order to incorporate that. So the details of that would have to be worked out.
Okay, thank you.
So that's basically what the strategic plan is, and I did want to point out that this is a growing document. This is not the be-all, the end-all. It's a working document. On page 3 of the document, it specifically states that the efforts that are presently underway and that would be underway with this plan will be influenced by future direction of redevelopment law and changes to the Piru area plan and changes to the county housing element. So those are all factors that are going to come into play. But again, this is a conceptual. Let's lay out at least a direction to go by. So that's stated in the document, and also what's stated in the document to follow up on the revisions that need to be made to Appendix A is that this adoption of this plan is expressing an intent, and it doesn't bind the agency to a specific course of action, nor does it appropriate funds at this time. So I'd be happy to answer any further questions that you have, and that's it.
I have one question, since right on you just pointed out that this is a conceptual adoption here. It doesn't commit the agency to any specific action. My question is, can this actual plan be changed also in the future?
Yes, that's the other thing.
Next year, the year after?
Yes, and in fact, I didn't point that out. It depends on the size of the agency that you come back. The larger agencies come back yearly, and to give a report on the plan and to ask if there's any changes to be made.
So it can be changed?
It can be changed.
Great. Thank you.
That, what Supervisor been about earlier, the in lieu of, you were talking about this a few minutes ago, does that, if the developer buys out basically of adding affordable housing, does that limit the number of affordable housing we have later, or does it delay it?
No, it doesn't limit it. The first part of that was to adopt an inclusionary policy. Right now, there's not an inclusionary policy that states that if you build a housing project here, a certain percentage of those homes have to be affordable. So that isn't a part of the area plan at this point. What we're saying is that we have a dovetail approach. We put that in as a requirement so that says that you have to build affordable homes. So there has to be an affordable housing requirement there. But the second part says that now that we say that you had to do this, if you either have an option. You can build the homes, or you can pay a fee, and that fee will go into a housing trust fund that will be used for the building of affordable homes somewhere else in the community.
Right, I understand. Now, does that delay, though, because that developer could build those now, we get the money into some trust fund, does that delay coming up with this affordable housing we've all been trying to get?
It could potentially. It depends on everybody's timing. It depends on if there's an affordable housing project that's on the horizon. It could go toward that. If there's not one on the horizon, then and the developer's building fast. So in reality, it could delay it at some point.
I just wanted to ask the one question concerning this appendix where there seems to be some question on the numbers. Does this really relate to the tax increment estimates?
It's not just the estimates, but the actuals from the prior years. It's not just the exhibit either. It's some of the tables in the report itself that speak to those property tax increments.
Okay, how do we address the ones in the report itself?
Again, the ones that are in the report are there more as an example of this is what we have, like the two that I showed you here. Those were two tables that were taken from the body of the report. So they need to be addressed, but they don't affect the conceptual document itself.
Okay, so any action the board takes would be taking that understanding that those tables have to be corrected or updated, but the impact of that does not make the validity of the plan.
Right, because the plan is a direction. The plan is a plan. It's not an action. It's a plan.
Supervisor Long?
Just to reaffirm that the language that's being proposed for the inclusionary is in essence what is already part of redevelopment law.
Exactly.
That requires that you have certain set aside for low-income housing.
Right, yeah, and that's why we said in the recommendation for the plan to be developed, the affordable housing plan, is to use the current redevelopment law for inclusionary housing for outside the project area.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any more comments? We can go to comment cards. All right. We have a Barbara Marcy Ortiz.
Good morning, Chairman Foy and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Barbara Macri Ortiz. I'm here on behalf of Advocates for Civil Justice and the clients that we represent in Ventura County. I just got this. I didn't see, I don't know if there was a notice of public hearing. I didn't see it, or a publication. I did not see anything. So I kind of got it on the tail end, and that would be something I'd ask you to check and make sure that your public hearing is legal to start with. One question I had that I hadn't heard is, in terms of the structures that were damaged in the 1994 earthquake, have those been taken care of? Has that been repaired? I didn't see anything in there. They were talking about substantial rehab and having to do some study. But so I'm assuming that the issues that were created in the 94 earthquake have been resolved. I would think by now we would have known about them if they're not. The comments I'd like to direct to the housing plan, and particularly in view of the fact that you're looking at this as a 10-year housing plan. And, inclusionary housing programs are very important. True redevelopment law establishes the floor, not the ceiling. And particularly if you're going outside of the redevelopment area, I think it's a good idea to think about what you really need to do, not just what the minimum requirements of the law are. And I think you need to, they tie it to the RENA numbers, and basically 60% of the housing need in the county is within the very low, and moderate. And so we say we're going to do 15% to meet the 60%. And that's why we have such a disconnect over time. So with respect to entertaining an inclusionary ordinance of any type, is to consider, making something a little bit more realistic. We really need to plan for the future, and we need to do it based on what the real world is like. We're paying for it now deeply with the subprime, crash. It's because there aren't all those people out there that can afford these $500,000 homes. So we really have to think about what is best for the long-term health of the county. And I think this is especially problematic here in Ventura County, where, ag is a big industry, as is, we're promoting tourism in this plan. And they're great, but they don't pay much. So we need to think about our housing needs to fit the workforce that we're having to support. With respect to the in lieu fees, I have a real concern about that because, for one, I mean, from experience, the problem with in lieu fees is generally they're not high enough to do much, and what you lose in comparison to what you get isn't realistic. I think from experience, the best, if you're going to give an out from building the housing, I think you need to talk about land. If you want to dedicate land in lieu of building housing, then you've got something, you've got an asset there that you can develop. But just in terms of the money, it really hasn't, you know, been that successful in terms of getting housing built. Another concern I had is with the amount of funds that were committed to substantial rehab, and they were primarily for moderate income, and I couldn't quite understand the reasoning for that, the rationale. Why so much was being targeted to substantial rehab for moderate income families who probably bought those homes at lower than what a moderate income family buys a home now. So, you know, it's like, is that really the best use of your money? I think you really need to look at that. And I think, you know, you need to, if you're going to do anything like that, I think you have to have much more supporting justification for it than certainly is laid out in the plan. There may not even be a need. They're going to do a survey. And I'm just wondering, why is there such a focus on that? Is that truly something, you know, are we wasting our time with that, or barking up the wrong tree in terms of what the real need is? You know, in terms of with the commitments of funds, I think you get some unrealistic stuff. You know, we're talking about the those emergency minimal type stuff. We're going to project $5,000 a unit for those. We're going to go to $57,000 for substantial rehab, and then for new construction, it's only $5,700. So, and I did hear the word cap used, and I think if you're talking about a cap, you better be very careful because, you know, whatever you develop, you want it to be reasonable and something that's workable, that will work in the long run. On the past performance chart, I'm not exactly sure why the Citrus View and Palm Gardens projects are listed, because if memory serves me correctly, they're either were not deed restricted, or the deed restrictions are probably are coming pretty close to running on them.
Ms. Ortiz? Your time is
okay.
up.
Wrapping up, I think that when you forecast, you shouldn't forecast based on your absolute minimum. You should forecast on what you want, not what you have to do. And I think you need to do that based on the other. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? She said something in regards to making public notice. We made public notice?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Janet Bergamo? Bergamo? Thank you.
Chairman Foy and board members, thank you for the opportunity to comment for the Neighborhood Council in Piru. My name is Janet Bergamo, and I've resided in Piru since 1973. We have, as a board and then also in a public meeting, gone over the concepts, and it's my understanding that we're emphasizing here that these are concepts and that numbers and the manner in which things would unfold would be adjusted depending on how things unfold with other developments in Piru. The community liked the idea very much, and particularly they liked the in lieu fee. I'd like to remind you that the median income in Piru is $21,000. This is the result of a study done by Public Works when they were looking at ways to fund the improvements for our sewer plant, the mandated upgrade.
Median family income?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I believe that the in lieu fee would benefit low and moderate. It doesn't restrict itself to moderate. And all you need to do is drive around Piru and see that there is a great need, and the people who don't qualify for low income nonetheless are burdened by many things financially, and this would help a lot of things. I like the idea that we can reduce some of the impact of new development, which, by the way, being outside of our redevelopment agency boundary, results in impact, but no actual benefit. I also would like to remind you that Piru has fewer than 12 employers. And so when you consider where are we putting low-income people, you're putting them in the most isolated area with the fewest services, a lack of public transportation, a lack of law enforcement. So I have heard it said in this room that you do your density where the services exist, and I'm reminding you that as hard as Monica Nolan has worked to help access services and improvements in our community, we are limited. That being said, we support this concept, both the community and the board. We think that the in-lieu fee is something well worth studying, and we are aware that it can be adjusted depending on how things unfold in the rest of the area. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. I am not an expert on redevelopment law, but thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much.
Just a question, if I might, Mr. Chair. Janet?
Yes.
Okay, so you note in your letter that Monica came out, met with the community and PNC well over a month ago. So
Correct.
That in itself was some public notice of this plan coming forward.
And it's also been posted in the community.
In addition to what we did with our notice, just
Yes.
to make that public record. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we have another card with Jester Nellis.
Chair Foy, members of the Board of Supervisors, CEO, Mr. Johnson, and staff, good morning. My name is Jess Ornelas. I'm the Deputy Development Director for Cabrillo Economic Development at 702 County Square Drive here in this great city of Ventura. A couple of things. First of all, I think the adoption of this affordable housing and five-year plan and 10-year plan is a good deal. In particular, that it encompasses not only the redevelopment area but the adjacent areas. I think it's a comprehensive plan. It's a better plan. I think that's important. I think the idea of being able to monitor the plan for purposes of review and perhaps change is also a good thing, because things are subject to change. The in lieu fee, I don't have a problem with the in lieu fee. I do, however, believe that if we're going to mix it up, that's an incentive not to. The way to give them the incentive to mix it up is to increase that fee to a place where there's a cost benefit to them, and they perhaps will then decide to do the units on the site. The other alternative, of course, and it was mentioned earlier, is land. Land is more critical than the dollars, and therefore it's a less of a bigger step, if you will. It's already a big step for developers of the Cabrillo type to be able to do this kind of development. I think the other thing is the way it's broken up in terms of the percentages. I think your rehab may be a little high. I think your new construction, that range should be higher. Perhaps 50% should be in new construction. And the cap at $5,700 a unit is extremely low, and for a developer like Cabrillo, very unrealistic. We need a lot more dollars in subsidy in order to bring the affordability to the families in Piru at $22,000 AMI, $22,000 annual income for family in Piru. That's extremely low income. And therefore, it requires a lot more subsidy in order for us, a Cabrillo-type developer, to be able to lower those rents where they're not strapped and having to pay 60, 70, 80% of their income towards the rent. So I would ask you to seriously look at two components: more dollars into the new construction and a higher amount in per unit in subsidy. Those are all my comments, and I'll try to answer any questions. I, too, am not an expert in redevelopment law, so I'll be handicapped.
Do you have any questions? I have one.
Yes, sir.
You talk about that, more dollars needing to go.
Yes, sir.
Each one. I mean, there's no question that we could reduce the cost of that down a little bit, but if I can't afford that, it doesn't help me. It's not useful to me, right?
Well,
because we don't have enough money to reduce the cost to where I can afford it. Nobody can spend 60 or 80% of their income on housing. It's pretty difficult.
That's very true, but your dollars would leverage other dollars out there, and so it would benefit. If your dollars are higher, we can also go out and get more dollars. Yes.
What about the thing I heard earlier that regards to, should we be building these units in Piru itself? Because we're away from all the employers where these people need to work.
Well, we had a meeting out there in Piru, and there was quite a number of families that came out. So I'm led to believe that there is a market for this development in Piru, irrespective of the expert who lives there and deals with it on a daily basis. We had a very good meeting out there when we presented our proposed development. There was a lot of families. Many didn't find out about the meeting until 4 o'clock that evening, and indicated to me that had they known in advance, there would have been a lot more. So, and that's nobody's fault. I'm not, but
you're saying it shows interest.
Yes, there is, very much so.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We have any more cards? That's it. Okay. We'll close the public hearing. All right. And,
Mr. Chair, could staff speak to some of the comments? Perhaps talk about the cap issue. Let me see. We've addressed the legal notice. Question on have the earthquake repairs been done, or inquiry. We've already talked about the in lieu fees. Perhaps not much more need there, but speak to some of the comments related to the cap and the rehab piece.
Sure. The 50 houses or structures that I talked about, they were rectified in the years since the earthquake. So the 50 number that I talked about was done. A little bit to explain a little bit, and I know this was there's a number of tables in here, and the majority of them have to do with the low mod fund. And about, how much goes toward this, how much goes toward that. Basically, what you need to look at is that we're talking about, at the end of 10 years, we hope to have $1.2 million. And that's what this fund addresses, is $1.2 million. What would we do at the end of 10 years with $1.2 million? How would we distribute it? This is the low mod fund. And redevelopment law says that, well, first of all, you've got to start to look at proportionality. You've got to look at what percentage are very low, low, and moderate, and then how do you proportion those dollars out amongst those three categories. So the consultant that was used to do this looked at not only proportionality, but also looked at the three things that the community had talked about, which was new construction, rehab, and these emergency loans. So what these tables refer to is how do you proportion out amongst low, very low, and moderate, and these three programs. And again, what you're talking about is the dollars, and then once you have the dollars proportioned out, then you have to go back and you look at the numbers. So as to the $5,700 per unit for new construction, that figure was backed into looking at what's 30% of 1.2, and then how do you divide that out. So that addresses that. The comment about that, I don't understand why there was not the substantial rehab numbers were low for the very low cells in these tables. The reason is that the tables address most of that money going toward new construction, i.e. the farm worker project. So it's kind of a shifting game, like a checkers board where you've got, or maybe I should say Sudoku, where you've got cells and you have to put things into different things. So, but the idea is you've got proportionality, you've got a limited amount of funds. Again, it's a projection of these funds. How are you going to do that, and what's your best guess at doing that approach?
Yeah, just a couple questions to help me clarify something. How much, for example, is the $5,700 locked in, or can that be changed?
No, that is we're saying that it's in here as a recommendation, and that's why we're saying that what we would like to do, and the steps that we've set at the end of the plan are to adopt the plan today and then come back to the board with what we call the housing production plan. So that's looking at how you're going to actually do this. What's going to be, who's going to qualify for the substantial loans?
So at that point in time, the 5,700 could be adjusted, the percentage inclusionary could be adjusted, all of these things could be adjusted.
Right.
This is a basic conceptual plan that could be adjusted in the future.
Right. There's two plans that we have to come back to the board for. One is the nuts and bolts of how you do this low mod money, and then the other one has to deal with working with the area plan update and the idea of if you do an in lieu fee, do you do to encourage them to build on the site, which means you make the fee astronomical, just like Chairman Foy said, that you're going to want to build on the site as opposed to paying the fee, or do you want to get the fee to put it toward another project like the farm worker site? So.
Well, good. I appreciate the public comments. They were good, and thanks for the explanation. So we have a motion here?
Mr. Chair, I thank staff for the work and the explanations, and thank the public comments, and I think that what you heard from our neighborhood council leader, as she always does, is she fairly reflects what the challenges are in Piru. It is one of the poorest communities in our county. It feels like it has always been the dumping ground for that very low income housing stock. It has great history, and it really fights hard to protect that history. When you talk about the basement or the baseline for the inclusionary housing component of it, it really is what is already acceptable to that community, to say that they understand what the baseline is and they are agreeable to what the redevelopment guidelines are for that baseline, but they want to have a clear voice and say in what the future mix in that community will be, so that we as a county who are challenged to meet our own housing element don't look to Piru to be that sole source for that housing element for the very low income community, because it is somewhat isolated. It doesn't have the job base. We know the big gorilla just east of Piru that is growing with Newhall will create some job opportunities, but that in itself creates additional challenges with traffic and roadways, etc. Another story. So I think that with an awful lot of work for a very small redevelopment, but important redevelopment area that doesn't generate near enough of the revenue that could be of value and useful in this community, I think they're doing a very good job with what we have and what's available to us. And I know that the comment made that tourism doesn't pay much. We're working on that piece too, so that tourism does pay much. And Piru has some opportunity there for enhancing its tourism trade. And then one other comment on lack of law enforcement, as I saw our esteemed representatives from our sheriff's office in the back. Piru also has, it has the service levels that's equivalent to the needs and the certainly the ability of our law enforcement personnel to provide out there. They have back and forth had law enforcement on site in a service station, and now they don't. And as any community, they would like to have more. And so that is something that, as we are able to assist this redevelopment area with some growth potential, with new housing and hopefully some new businesses, we'll be able to provide a higher level of service also. So just to capture those pieces, I wanted to make that note for the record. And with that, I support the recommended actions that have been brought forward, knowing full well that, as it was mentioned, it will come back to this board for the housing production plan, for the discussion on the in lieu fee proposal, as it will go to the community to hear their voice and what their dreams and desires are. So I'll move the recommended action.
I'd like to second it as soon as I just ask a question.
Okay.
Our auditor, Christine Cohen, you raised some issues here about the appendix, et cetera, and I just want to, we talked briefly here, and I just want to try to make sure I clearly understand. Your perception is that there's some errors in the tables that affect the appendix, which affects the, if I want to see if I've got this right, which affects the amount of dollars projected into the future, and the amount of dollars projected in the future determine the amount of housing.
It may or may not.
It may or may not determine the amount of housing. My understanding is that this is a pretty flexible document. It's sort of a conceptual approval of this. So do you see it that way also from the standpoint of if after this staff works with you, adjust this table, then this table can be incorporated at the appropriate time that we're okay going forward with this conceptually? Yes, thank you. All right, I'll second your motion.
So we can approve this as it is, or the county, council, do we have to do anything different?
You may either approve it as it is, or you may approve it subject to changes in the forecast or other tables to reflect the auditor controller's work.
Well, the question I'd ask is, again, there was a question earlier about delaying this and whether there was a risk of penalty if we did so. By moving this forward to say that we're going to get these charts corrected so that the document reads, I think that, good people and good minds will come together and get it accomplished. And the motion would reflect that that needs to be done for the submittal.
Okay. So we're okay. We have a motion and a second.
Okay.
So it's approved. Okay.
To clarify, to then correct and submit
and to correct
the
and submit
version.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Great. You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Just one additional note. I forgot to thank everyone. I want to thank Tom Fig, who is the consultant for this plan. I want to thank Bruce Smith and Dennis Hawkins of RMA Planning that gave some valuable input to the plan. And I also want to thank the Piru Neighborhood Council and the Piru community for the input, too.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you, Monica.
Comment?
I just wanted to add a thank you to Monica, but also to point out for people who track these things, it's not exactly exciting reading in the newspaper about redevelopment agencies and the power of eminent domain. This has made the ballot in the state is a real concern to a lot of people. Here is an example of a redevelopment project that actually is doing what redevelopment projects are supposed to do. It is not using eminent domain to get there, and it is not just a tax transfer scheme to capture land that was going to be developed anyway and then keep the taxes for reinvestment within a particular jurisdiction. That having been said, that's also one of our problems, is that it's very difficult to do this in a proper way. And so I want to thank you and your staff for the efforts that you put in and the community participation.
Good work.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. We'll go to our 10:30, a little late. Presentation by the CEO's office on our budget. Number 34.
Paul, come on up. This is going to be very brief, but have we heard anything this morning from Sacramento?
Not that I know.
There's no late-breaking news. There's still a stalemate up there. Just to give you an update, there are a couple of issues that are on the horizon as a result of the delay in the state. One is a cash flow issue, that we do rely on a certain amount of money coming in for programs that we administer but that are funded by the state. And when they don't adopt a budget and don't send the money locally, and as of August 1st, or roughly now, the beginning of August, if they don't adopt a budget, we will be, as we have in the past, being expected to continue the service and help finance that. I don't know, is it about a $7 or $8 million cash?
That's our estimate per month, about $7 million a month.
So it's not big, and fortunately our house is in order this time. When that happened back in 01, 02, 03, we were in pretty desperate shape because we weren't able to pay our own bills, let alone pay the state's bills. That fortunately is no longer the situation, but we do encourage the governor and his friends at Sacramento to get on with this. The second issue, there are a couple pieces of legislation that affect the probation department, one of which is Prop 36 and the other is, what is it, 81?
SB 81.
SB 81. We'll come back to you probably in late October when we do kind of a revise on the budget to give you what that means. We think there may be something like a $2 million issue that's cropping up. And then there's the Williamson Act. I don't know what the latest standing on that was, but if they were to do what was originally suggested they were doing, it was going to hit the county for about $450. Not a big number, but nonetheless, it's, you know, one more thing. So, Paul, what else do we have?
On the Williamson, the governor had that in, and our indications are that the Senate and Assembly bills do not have that as being taken out. So we think we're okay on the Williamson deal. But our two issues really are in the probation area, correct? And those are trailer bills, and the other is not funding the Prop 36, which could be significant for probation.
So just kind of a heads up, and we'll keep you posted when you get back from your break.
Oh, and by the way, the state does not pay interest on our loan that we give them.
I was going to ask that question, yeah. We're fronting them the money, will they pay us some interest?
No, ma'am.
That's sort of, they operate.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll move on to 53? Can we do that? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Johnson. Alec Pringle of the Public Works Agency. The item before you is in regard to the replacement clinic at Ventura County Medical Center. It provides for additional funding for the project, authorizes actions to finance, construct, and operate the facility, as well as including actions for bidding and award of the contract within the limits noted in the board letter. Your board originally approved this project in May of 2005, including financing and the EIR addenda and construction. However, due to some unprecedented increases in construction costs over the last 3 to 5 years, this action for additional financing is being requested. It also includes some unexpected additional cost of updating the building code design from 1994 to today, as well as a median cost for estimating being under that, which was actually occurring in the construction market at the time, and also some increased costs due to the final design of the foundations for the project. The plans and specs are currently in the final phase of approval for bidding in the near future, and once those are approved, we'll be going out to bid shortly thereafter. I'll be happy to answer any questions. This board letter was co-signed with the healthcare agency, and I invite Mr. Mike Powers up here to add any comments on the operational or financing.
Thank you, Alec. Good morning, Chairman Foy, board members, Mr. Johnson. Yes, this is the project that your board had approved that will allow VCMC to bring back onto campus several specialty and primary care clinics that are currently located off-site in cramped, older, leased space, as well as, in one case, the family care clinic and the residency in a 10-year-old trailer. This will also be better for the patients, who will be able to access services better all on the hospital campus, their ancillary services like lab and radiology and so forth. In terms of financing, the good news is that the 1732 program is still viable, and it will actually help offset the increased construction costs. It will reimburse about 48%, almost half of the increased cost. The rest of the annual payment will be funded by least cost avoidance, as well as a long-term debt service retirement, which will, on certain projects, which will have retired by 2011, which is the year that we will start repaying the loan for the financing for the project. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? You want to make a comment?
Paul, is there anything you want to add? Do we have a finance committee meeting as of when? Tomorrow or today? Today. Okay.
Today.
And as far as the sequence of how that process works, we are in sequence, correct?
Yes, we all had met the other day, and I had some questions on this, and I know that it's a big number, and we know the construction cost has gone through the roof from 25 million to 50 million. It's huge, but we've also seen that on everything else, from these traffic lights and everything that's going through. And trying to understand what the healthcare agency is doing and trying to work this, it sounds like we got the other part of the government paying for half of this. We've got leases that are already out there that we're paying for some of that, and then we've got a few things of some debt service that we're going to be paid off that'll help. So we don't have a whole lot of extra cost. But I know, Paul, in our meeting, you were still looking at that, and you're pretty comfortable we'll be able to pay this bill, huh?
Right. When we do our projections out, when you take all that into account, their long-term costs under this plan versus, let's say status quo, so to speak, are about where they are now, right around roughly in the $3 million range for all those. As you go project out for the long term, it means about $3 million. Obviously, if you didn't build this new building, some of the costs would go away that wouldn't be taken on with new debt, but overall it's maintaining about the same cost level in the out years as they have currently.
And we know that in order to meet our demand, we'd have to expand some of the facilities that we already have and renovate some of those facilities at some cost. So looking at this, and as the auditor and I sat in that meeting trying to figure out, can we build 5 stories, 3 stories, can we save some money? But it sounds like it's a difficult, you got these needs, and it's just a huge number, $50 million to do, but it sounds like we've got the ability to do it. And I was going to ask real quick, I know we had an earlier comment in regards to the finance markets. We're seeing it all upheaval in the last week or so. But this doesn't have much effect on the kind of borrowing we do?
It all depends. I think our biggest risk from our tax-exempt borrowing standpoint is really a Supreme Court case, the U.S. Supreme Court case decision that they're looking at it as far as the state of Kentucky, where they're saying that you can't allow one state to charge tax-exempt and then not charge and tax a out-of-state income from another state's bond issue. For example, the state of California exempts California state issuances from California state taxpayers, and they charge, if you buy a Texas bond, they charge you interest, or they'll charge you tax on the interest you earn on a Texas, but not on a California. So the U.S. Supreme Court is looking at that issue, and if that issue is voted against us, we could see a little bit of increase in rates, because it'll equalize across the state, because California generally is a high tax state. California and New York are probably going to be the most susceptible, and probably about 0.5% increase is what the estimates are. So that's probably more of an issue from our standpoint, and we would need to disclose that in any bond documents at this point in time, that whole issue is going on. But the markets are, they'll go up and down, and if the market completely turns around, obviously it would cost us more in the short term, and we may have to refinance down the road, those types of things. But there are a lot of options that we can go for. Okay. Right now, our plan is to use commercial paper for the time being, which is a shorter term note, and it's still under 4%. So that's our current plan, and then we refinance at some point in time.
And we realize too that if we delay and not move forward, that we, as Public Works has told us, this is costing us about $300,000 a month not to get this project underway.
That's correct. Yeah. As far as their increase in
these construction costs, it sounds like it could be more than $300,000 a month.
Yeah, that's correct. We're seeing a little slowdown in inflation over what we saw in some of the previous years, but we still, looking at the size of the project and normal inflation, we'll see those kind of numbers in a month.
Okay. Well, great. I don't have more questions.
I don't have questions. I have these comments that I'd like to make of this project we've been working on for some time, and I appreciate your questions about the financing. We have to recognize that we have sort of a nationally prestigious family residency program. We're doing something, different and pretty remarkable here in terms of our whole county health care program. And to have this nationally prestigious family residency program operating out of these trailers, and that there's a disconnect there, and the disconnect ultimately affects our citizens and our residents that use that, because it makes a difference how many quality physicians we can attract and whether we can get those physicians to stay after they do their residency. All of that stuff is impacted, and I think we've had some remarkable success, and to continue to have the success, we have to grab those opportunities that we can to modernize our facilities. And so the replacement clinic is exactly that. We're taking some, think about the old lab. We had a lab that was built in the 1920s. The wiring wouldn't even handle the new lab equipment and stuff. So it's rare that public entities are able to do this, and I would offer that. So it's the appropriate thing to do, and then the question is financing. Is it appropriate financially? But when you look at the combination of the least cost avoidance, the long-term financing shifting over here to this, but most importantly, when you have a rare opportunity, we can get the state to pay 50% of it for you. You put all of that together, and you see the costs are just constantly moving. And although there may be a little bit of a drop, China and India are still going like crazy. You're going to be driving construction costs and materials costs and all that stuff. I think it is just really appropriate for us to do this and do it now, and get 50 or 60 years of great value out of this facility. And when we look back on it in hindsight, you'll think it was far better that you did it at this point in time. So I'm very supportive of it. I'd like to move the recommended action.
Second. And to add to those comments, certainly agree. I think that we cannot afford to be short-sighted. We've built, the team, many people before me, built what is now an excellent program of delivery of health care in this county, and to be able to have the residencies who bring us both the skill sets and the commitment, and in many cases we grow our own, to have them appreciated in a facility that respects the work they do and the learnings that they are undertaking is well worth the investment, and it has to be looking at the long term. It's got big numbers right now, and the general public will see those big numbers, but I think that in building the case of cost avoidance and using other people's money, as it were, even though it's still taxpayer dollars, we all understand that, but the state in this case has a commitment there, and I think it's well worth the investment, and we need to move ahead.
You have a comment?
I do. I'm concerned with recommendation 1 taking place before the Financial Planning Committee has met on this. This is the first time I've experienced it out of whack timing-wise, and it's to me important that the Financial Planning Committee members review the entire borrowing considerations, not just project by project, before a recommendation like this is made.
As we said earlier, that it costs us about $300,000 a month to wait. Is there something that we, in this recommendation, that we could move forward with, but have the option to come back if there's a problem under finance?
The Financial Planning Committee is meeting at 1:30 this afternoon. We could have continued this until after that meeting took place or scheduled it earlier. I'm just concerned that we're setting a precedence here, that the Financial Planning Committee look at the recommendations for borrowing before it comes to the board for an action on an actual project.
I have a suggestion, but I want to hear what.
Well, I think our plan is that the Financial Planning Committee would make the recommendation. There's no final decision because the borrowing hasn't happened yet. So the Financial Planning Committee is the group that kind of recommends to the board how you're going to borrow. And I think what the board is saying, they're delegating here, saying, hey, we agree with the concept of this program and plan, and Financial Planning Committee, go ahead and determine how you're going to finance this thing. That's how we think it'd be the best to approach it, and that's how we thought we approach it. Generally speaking, the board conceptually approves a project, which they have done many years ago on this project. The problem is that the cost went up so significantly that we're back here at the board saying, hey, costs went up significantly. We think you need to take another look at it, make sure you're still in favor of it. The board says, hey, we're still in favor of it. Let's send it back to the Financial Planning Committee to take a look at how the best way to finance things and move forward from there. And that's what we would recommend.
And that's my issue with recommendation number 1. If you were just doing 2 and 3, I would understand. But with recommendation 1, you're establishing the borrowing need before the Financial Planning Committee is met.
I think there's no doubt there's a borrowing need. It's kind of a chicken-egg issue, because there's no doubt there's a borrowing need when we have a $56 million project. And I think the idea is that your board says, yes, we need to go forward with this project. Now, how are we going to afford this? And that's the Financial Planning Committee's dictate.
I'd just like to offer the way I read one says from either tax-exempt commercial paper or certificates of participation or both for the design, financing, et cetera. So what we're basically saying is that, yes, finance this thing and use one, the other, or both of these things, and that's what the Finance Committee should do at 1:30 is to determine that. So I think that if the Finance Committee, number one, we always have the ability to do something different. If the Finance Committee finds there's some big problem at 1:30, this issue could come back. I think it makes sense for us to go forward.
Yeah, and it's subject to the review and recommendation of the Financial Planning Committee.
Yeah, following up on what Paul said, the issue of whether you go to finance before you come to the board, this question came up a couple times a few years back, and my position and recommendation to your board is that we should not be having departments and people going to a finance committee and asking sort of the hypothetical question, if the board were to be interested in the subject, how would you finance it, and then bring it to the board saying that the finance committee has already said this is affordable. Our view is it comes to the board first, is this something the board wants to do, and then it goes to the finance committee to how it should be done. And if there's a problem on how it should be done, then it'd be an iterative process where it would come back. If there is no problem, then we would proceed.
Well, I agree with that. I think that has come up before.
It has.
We have the Finance Committee meeting and going through that process. Particularly with this project this big, we ought to say, yes, we want to do this. Now figure out exactly how we're going to do it.
That's, I guess I read number one that way, that it does say, look at the financing options, either and or both, and then subject to the review and recommendation by the Finance Committee. The board's given policy direction here, and the board's giving political direction here, and the committee needs to know that the board is either committed to it or not to expend then the time of determining what's the best financing mechanism. So, again, did I, or did you move the recommended action?
Let me just ask one more question then. Ms. Cohen, do we have, with what they talked about is we're approving what we want to do. Your concern here, though, is that if something is not equal to what's been proposed in this letter, are they going to be coming back and saying, if we talk about if the credit market is out of whack and it's going to cost us another point, which will put this thing much more expensive, is that where you're coming from? That we haven't determined that yet?
That and procedure versus past practice. Items 2 and 3 is basically speaking to the project itself. I have no problem with that. I agree that the board needs to take a position on the project first.
Right.
My concern with item number 1 is that usually it goes to Financial Planning Committee after the board has recommended the project, but you're being asked to approve the issuance, sale, and use up front in number 1 before the Financial Planning Committee has met. That's not the practice. The practice has been that the project comes back to the board with that recommendation after Financial Planning Committee has reviewed it.
Let me ask this question. Trying to understand what she's talking about. If we exclude number 1, because she wants to go to Finance Committee first, talk about how they're going to fund this project, that doesn't stop anybody else from moving forward on this project, does it? Would it stop it because you don't have the ability for the paper?
No, we wouldn't. Generally speaking, nothing would happen that fast anyway. But the board has already approved the use of commercial paper for up to $30 million.
Right. So we're moving.
The only reason we're back here, we'd even go back to the Financial Planning Committee at all, is because we don't have enough commercial paper to afford a $56 million building. Therefore, we're going to have to look at other alternatives. And the other alternatives is what we would expect the Financial Planning Committee to be evaluating, not the overall cost of the project.
In a sense, we've already once approved the finance. All we're doing is going from the $30 million to the $58 million. And it seems to make sense for us to say, let's go to the 58 million and work those details out. Mr. Johnson?
If the cost of the project goes up, just as it brought us here today, and just as we came back when we were dealing with the cafeteria and the lab, the price project goes up beyond where we've been received authorization, we'll come back here. The question is how, if it stays within these guidelines, how are we going to finance it, and what the best mechanism is, which we do through the finance committee. Is that's whether that I'm not quite sure this past practice issue. I mean, let's assume that was the past practice. What is the problem with doing it this way? Is there a problem with doing it this way other than that?
Yeah, this is a new practice.
Yeah, right.
Well,
yes, I mean, is it a problem if we set this precedent this way? I guess, is there a problem?
it might come out in the Financial Planning Committee meeting, what other issues might come up when you're looking at the financing part that may or may not have been included in Recommendation 1 today.
Right.
Could that be addressed? And if a problem comes up
Absolutely.
at the Finance Committee, then it comes back. But if a problem doesn't come up, then it just goes.
I thought we addressed that subject to the recommendation and approval of the Financial Planning.
And I know this is only because of an issue, because we're not going to meet for another 3 or 4 weeks. But in a typical practice, we would be meeting the next week. So if it would have come up, we would have had within 7 days, we're back here
We
again
would have
talking
this
about it.
Financial Planning Committee meeting first, and then this board letter.
We would have?
Yes.
No, I don't believe that's true.
Okay.
I believe that, generally speaking, we want to make sure the board is behind the project before we go get financing for any project.
I agree with that comment,
What's
but
that?
not with Recommendation 1. That's not, that's unusual.
This has happened before.
All right, well, what it sounds like, though, but after we have this meeting this afternoon, if there's an issue, it can always come back before the board. Sure. So I think we can move forward.
And you're going to be at that meeting.
Yeah, I'm going to be there with you.
So
Yeah, I'll be there.
if at that meeting you don't like what happens, you can bring this thing back.
But I want to just make sure I don't want to delay it at $300,000 a month in any way, shape, or form. And we don't do that. So, okay, we had a motion?
And a second.
And a second. Okay, so we'll move forward. But thank you. We'll see you at the.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, members of the board, Mr. Johnston, item 54, award of consulting services contract for the fire station in Simi Valley for the replacement of a 50-year-old station there. If you have any questions regarding this, we're representing the fire district on providing this work for them.
These are two different, you're going to do 54, 55, they're two different stations.
That's correct.
Right. Much larger than one different, I just noticed a big difference in cost. Is there?
One, we have an existing fire station that's being replaced. The other one is bare land where we're building a new
So you're
station.
tearing down and redoing, that's part of the cost. Okay, great. Now, do we have a motion?
I realize these two fire stations are in your district, but I'd like to point out, partially for your benefit, years ago, when the other fire stations came forward, we asked that the fire stations, when they come forward, they come forward with a policy that said they would do 20 or 25% better than the state energy guidelines. And I think that was a wise policy for us to adopt, because back then energy was not projected to be going up as fast as it is now, and I don't think any of us know how fast it's going to go up. I had an interesting conversation with somebody that said it won't be long. A lot of people will be trying to make a decision whether to buy food or buy energy, But so what I realized when we went back to research this, when we saw it, it says, why isn't that in here? And they said, well, that wasn't a policy. That was just a policy for those fire stations. And I thought we were saying that was a policy for all the fire stations. I don't want to hold this up also. So what I would just like to ask us to do is, number one, I think I'd like to have that, by doing it again a second time, have it sort of indicate this is where the board wants these to go. But but I'd like to have added to the recommended action that the department make a strong effort to either meet the green building silver certification or otherwise make the buildings highly energy efficient and report back to the board early in the design process. So it's early in the design process, so we can see it early in that design process and say, yes, makes sense or it doesn't make sense. I'd like to point out the state already requires that all new state buildings be certified to the LEED silver level, and the federal government's also adopted that standard. I just think as we're adopting, just last week, climate change plan, et cetera, for us to not clearly identify that with these two. So I'd like to suggest that we should add this to this motion and then to motion 55 on the next fire station. Just give us that report early in the design process in terms of.
You may already have, is this designed at some level?
No, we do not, but we can do what Supervisor Bennett's requesting. That's not a problem. We will be glad to do that. Okay. We did check on the policy with the fire district, and they had told us that we were given everything. We were not told that there was a policy, and there's
fine. But I mean, because of what this whole push for the green side, we're building almost all these things to this higher standard anyway, or to some pretty good standard, or not?
We always are reviewing with the consultants any of the energy efficiency recommendations that they are bringing forth. We analyze those and incorporate those into the project. Mm-hmm. We'll be glad to bring all of those recommendations back to the board, and like we're requesting.
Yeah. And I would offer that it's a little bit like the Emancipated Youth Program. You know, there are a lot of subjective decisions that have to be made, and it goes, well, that's going to cost us more now, and so you don't put that in there. But if you're trying to meet the silver certification standards, you go, well, the silver standards say you should choose between one of these three, and so maybe we won't meet it in this area, but we will, we will go there in that area. So the goal would be to try to get the project to come in more energy efficient than the state requires. And right now, if you read this board letter, there's no reference that would actually happen. Certainly, staff's going to be trying to pay attention. This would set that bar a little bit higher and a little bit more explicitly. We would get, if we didn't do this right now, this would go forward and the project would be designed, and it would come back to us after it was designed. Right. And what should happen is early in the design process, come back and show us how it is making it, so that we don't sit there and say, now it'll cost us a lot of money to redesign the project.
Right, because it is cheaper to design it in than it is to redo it later, right?
That's correct.
How do you want to move forward with this? I mean, if we hold this up while you come back with that in there, or we just add it to it now?
My suggestion, just add this
just
to
add
the
it to it, because I don't want to. The only thing it may change is it may change some of these numbers, right?
I don't believe so. I think we can go forward with this item as is suggested for amendment, and it would not be a problem.
Without a problem. Okay, so why don't you make a motion?
All right. So my motion is to adopt staff's recommended actions and direct both departments, the fire department and public works, to make a strong effort to either meet the standards for the green building silver certification or otherwise make the buildings highly energy efficient, and that the board be provided a report back early in the design process on how this can be accomplished. Right?
And I'll second that, and also encourage that we take a look at, I still believe there are grants available at the state through the Energy Commission or PUC for public agencies to look at doing just this, to receive some of these energy efficiencies, to put in photovoltaic roofs. And if we're starting the design path here, we ought to just look at everything available to help do that. Second.
Okay. Then you go ahead with that, and that'll be great. Appreciate we had that in motion. So,
okay,
good.
And I'll repeat that motion for item 55, or item
56.
55.
Yeah,
that was 54.
For the second fire station. Yeah, that was 54.
Do you have any comments on the second one?
Yeah, for 55.
No, it's
same thing.
Yeah,
a different consultant, but staff recommendations written here.
Okay.
Second.
You repeat it. Do we have to repeat it?
I don't think.
Does he have
do I
to
have to repeat it, County Council?
No, we just agree with that same one. Okay. Second. Okay.
Thank you.
That passes. Great.
Members of the board, thank you, Mr. Kearns.
Thank you. You got 56 here now?
I think we just moved on 56 also.
No.
No, we did 54,
okay.
55. And, yeah.
Pardon me.
No, 56.
Yes, we have completed the negotiations and bringing the lease back before the board with the healthcare agency for the contract on Williams Drive. We're asking authorization to authorize director as designee to enter into the extensions in future leases for the 10% annual lease cost. If you have any questions about the item, I'd be pleased to respond.
So you want to try to put it in there so we'll just, if anything's under 10%, we can just automatically make extensions?
That has been the practice for years, Boards have done that in the past. It's nowhere in writing that we can find, so we've included it in this to just bring it to the board on this item addressing the 10% issue.
But most of your lease increases are usually in 3 to 4%, right?
That's correct.
Right. But you just want to be in a situation where we don't have to wait when you negotiate.
On a case-by-case basis. This has been the practice.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. That's good. Number 57?
Item 57, Chair and members of the board, Mr. Johnston, we're asking approval of the plan specifications for the Engineering Service Division, waive any of the minor irregularities, and authorize Director of Public Works to award the contract to the lowest responsive bidder. We would like to award this with the board in recess so that we aren't having any delays and can get the work done before the rainy season should approach. If there's any questions about this, the exhibits are in the item showing the work areas on the roads and the different areas, and be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Nope. Move the recommended action.
Second.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 58. Appointments of new members to the Appeals Board.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Johnson. My name is Jim McDonald. I'm the building official for the county, and today I'm here to present for your consideration the appointment of 3 new members to the Building and Safety Boards of Appeals. The 3 boards are the General and Housing Appeals Board, the Electrical Appeals Board, and the Board for Accessibility Appeals. As provided in the current Ventura County Building Code, the Building Department, or the Building and Safety Boards of Appeals, exists to hear appeals of orders and interpretations of the building official and to render interpretations of the county's adopted codes relative to the suitability of alternate materials and methods of construction. The nature of these boards are very technical, and the persons that are proposed for appointment on these boards before you today are known to be qualified by experience, training, and education in the areas that they're being asked to serve and render interpretations on. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Do we have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment, which is we're lucky to get good people to do this. I mean, these are qualified people, technical people, and I mean, this is the classic, people ask about how can you give back to your community. It's a classic giving back to the community. So nice job recruiting good people.
Well, thank you very much.
How often do you have to come before these appeals?
Only when there's been an appeal of a decision of the building official, and in general, my goal, as been my past predecessor's goal, is to deal with it in the building official, at the building official level. If there's a difference in interpretation of the provisions of building standards, that's when it would go. In the 12 years that my predecessor was here, they met twice. And so they do need to be in place in case there's an appeal, especially if we have an emergency where the Board of Appeals would have to be convened quickly. So they do need to be available.
That's great. Well, good.
And I will note that I asked the previous building official to serve, and he agreed until his wife intervened and said that he has to wait 1 year before he serves on any committees. So we'll call him next year.
Is that a different conflict of interest rule?
Yeah, right. That's probably a good rule, actually.
Yeah.
Move the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I suppose that'd be a spousal conflict of interest rule or something, right? A happy marriage or happy retirement.
Okay, so number 59. Great.
Good morning, Chairman Foy and members of the board. I'm Nancy Suttle with the Resource Management Agency Planning Division. Item 59 before you this morning is approval of grant proposals for the Coastal Impact Assistance Program that comes around approximately every 5 years. The last time Ventura County, in 2001, what Congress approves release of funds from a revenue account that receives oil royalties from offshore oil development. Last time Ventura County had a one-time a funding of about $350,000. At that time, we did some wetlands mapping program. We also did a fish team funding effort, and we also funded some photovoltaic retrofits on the county fire stations. This year, it's a little bit different. There's a 4-year funding cycle that's at about $256,300 for the county of Ventura, and every county who's eligible is going to get different amounts of funding depending on their proximity to offshore oil resources and the amount of oil that's generated on an annual basis. So these numbers could shift a little bit. There are also, this year, the Mineral Management Services is overseeing this project, as well as the Resources Agency, which happened last time. This time, not only is the protection of coastal resources important and mitigation for any impacts from offshore oil development, but also there's the Ocean Protection Council. The Resources Agency and Governor Schwarzenegger has stated that any funding proposals will receive top preference if you're consistent with the Ocean Protection Council's recommendations, which includes those type of actions and projects that help benefit the water quality or things that may impact our ocean resources. So given that, we have a list of 5 what's called Tier 1 proposals. There is actually a change before your board this morning. We have been thinking and deliberating. There's always never enough money to do what one would like to do when you get these grant proposals. So we have a list of projects, and with the change that's before your board, it includes the same listing of projects with one exception. We included a climate change mitigation and adaptation, which focuses on county operations, but it also will take a look at water resources and drought planning with respect to climate change and global warming. There's a biological conservation program, a watercourse and wetland buffer ordinance for flood control protection, and then there's also consideration of low-impact development for our coastal and non-coastal areas. And what we've done with the change before your board is pulled together all the local coastal plan relevant actions that they were scattered in the board letter that you received, and put them under one area as Tier 1 funding. And so it includes the whole list of things that would also affect our non-coastal area, but it also includes things that we think our coastal ordinance is lacking, like our tree protection ordinance, for instance, is in effect in our non-coastal, but not our coastal area. So that was a significant, the primary change that we had there. And we also juggled the funding a little bit, took a little funding out of the climate change and put it into the coastal plan update. And we generally felt this was more consistent with the goals and the criteria that the state will be looking to for when they review our plans. At your board's approval of this, we'll be preparing more detailed scopes of work. These will be submitted August 31st. The state then reviews them and confers back with us. If they see anything that's missing, if there's something maybe they didn't think we had things on target, they will notify us of our projects by the end of October, and then so we can make modifications if we think there needs to be some modifications. We bring the whole thing back to your board in January for final review and then acceptance of grant funds at that time. If you have any specific project or questions on any of I gave you, also let me explain, there's a Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 2 projects were requested to be included in case there's additional funding. So we also have another backup list.
So that's what that means. So Tier 1 is what you're recommending.
Yes.
And Tier 2, if we get any extra money, we're going to go.
That's right. They said there's a chance that not all counties, because some counties don't get much money, although I can't imagine they would not want to apply for this, or there could be additional funds that become available because of the oil production. Levels could change, and you'll be ready to move forward with something.
Okay. You have a comment?
No.
So there's nothing we have to do with this, just approve it. And
just approve our
1 or 2 or whatever.
Our submittal and the changes as recommended.
If you could just have this question, I spent a fair amount of time on the first Tier 1 projection. Could you explain to me again
changes?
Why the changes weren't thought of the first time around? What changed in your thinking to make you say, hey, let's modify?
Well, what changed in our thinking was how did we want to proceed on the local coastal plan update? We had portions of programs like low impact development and a watercourse setback And then back in the Tier 2 were the tree ordinance and other aspects of the local coastal plan update. We felt that really we wanted to have that whole package. So we moved the local coastal plan, so now you will have a more complete in its entirety package.
Because it's more efficient, or because you realize that those things actually had more priority?
Both. We think it's more efficient, and we also think those other items have very close connect. One of the things that's actually called out in the Ocean Protection Council strategy is update your local coastal plan. They actually call it out, and we felt that will give us a better chance at just saying, yes, go ahead and proceed with this.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd move the recommended action.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We got 60, our Sheriff's Department.
Chairman and 4 members of the board, Mr. Johnson, I'm Chief Deputy Kathy Kemp from the Detention Services Division of the Sheriff's Department. The item before you relates to Assembly Bill 900, which I think you are probably familiar with. The state of California has gone through many options in trying to resolve their overcrowding in prisons, and this was the result of finally coming together. There are 2 specific items that deal specifically with county areas and the communities within those counties. And I have to say, one of them deals with the expansion of local jails, and we've been fortunate to have a strong voice at the county CSAC level with Supervisor Long, and as a result of that, she was selected to be a member of the Executive Steering Committee for the Correction Services Agency that will be determining the RFP process for local jail facilities. And I give that to you for the basis.
She gets to go to a meeting for a change.
More meetings, a lot of more meetings. I give you that background to then move into the other phase that affects communities, law enforcement agencies, and the county, and that is the proposal by the state that they develop what are called reentry facilities. That is much of what they want for a reentry facility. The processes that we're going to go through are still very fluid at this point. I don't think that the determination of exactly what the RFP process are going to look like have been determined. But we did receive, on behalf of Supervisor Parks, in place of the board, received a letter from Secretary Tilton, who is the Secretary of the Corrections and Department of the state prison system, and he basically gave you a letter, and it's attached to the item, discussing the reentry facilities and the hope that the County of Ventura would begin to discuss with them what might be the right thing for Ventura County. So in an effort to respond to that letter, we're asking for 2 things. One, that you authorize the sheriff to respond to Secretary Tilton regarding the fact that we would like to have some discussions with some of his state representatives regarding what they're talking about, what options are, what might or might not be good for the County of Ventura, and then also to set up a study session in which during the course of this next month we will begin to put together some specific data provided to us from the state prison system regarding parolees and some of the other things that I hope will become much more clear in the next 30 days or so as they begin to provide us additional information so that we in turn can provide that to you. And I am available to answer a multitude of questions, but I'm going to leave that to you if you need to have some additional clarification.
You have a question?
I'll just make some comments. We've met on this, and there have been a few meetings to bring this forward, and it is to really provide us a place at the table. When we get to the table, if we don't like the way it's set, we don't like what it would cost, we're not committed. But this will give us an opportunity to be at the table to talk about what options are available to us, how it may be tied in with our other needs, how to deal with what really is a population that will be pushed down to the counties one way or the other. So I think that there's a reason for us to agree to take a look at this, and I think the study session will give us more information as it evolves from the state. And also there's a regional summits that are being planned, and the one that we would be invited to, and that is by invitation, it would be Friday, October 5th in Los Angeles. That our county and Santa Barbara would be invited to. So we'll prepare us by having a study session ahead of time and the ongoing dialogue internally with the leadership team to be prepared to go to that summit, and then at the end of the day, determine whether or not we agree with what the table may look like. So, and the piece of it that I'm serving on the executive committee has not been firmed as far as when our first meeting will take place, but obviously it's going to happen pretty fast, because that committee will design what the RFP will be that will go out to the local communities, and what the pros and cons of those who wish to compete for it may be. So I think this is the right thing to do. I'd move the recommended action.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have to receive and file our correspondence agenda.
Move to receive and file. And, Mr. Chair, if I might, I did not have my adjourn in memories when I had board comments, so I'd like to, for the record, I submitted a list to adjourn in memory.
All right, great. Thank you. And County Council, do we have anything that's going to come out of this meeting?
It's likely we'll have an announcement or two, or maybe even three out of this closed session.
So we won't adjourn until we come back then.
Right.
Okay, great. Then we'll go into closed session. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we'll resume. We have an announcement from council.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have announcements on 3 matters. The first one concerning item 36 on the agenda, in the case of Michael Andrews versus County of Ventura et al., United States District Court case number CV06-060540, the Board of Supervisors has, by a vote of 3-0, approved the payment of $1.5 million in full and final settlement of all of the plaintiff's claims. The county's insurers will bear most of the cost of the settlement. The second announcement also concerns item 36 on the agenda. In the case of Community Development Commission of the City of Oxnard versus County of Ventura et al., Court of Appeal of the State of California, 5th Appellate District, case number F050180. The Board of Supervisors has, by a vote of 3-0, approved a petition to the California Supreme Court requesting review of the Court of Appeals decision. And the final announcement concerning item 39 on the agenda, in the case of Tiffany Group, Inc. versus Ventura County Watershed Protection District, Office of Administrative Hearings, case number A-0021-05, the Board of the District has, by a vote of 3-0, approved the payment of the sum of $70,000, one-half of which will be paid by the City of Port Hueneme, in full and final settlement of the contractor's claims in this construction litigation case. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's nothing else? Well, yes, have a good break. Enjoy your summer. Adjourn this meeting. Thank you.